said solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, welcome to Monday. It's a Monday all day long, but y'all, that means it's a meatloaf Monday. Hit it, man.
I think I'll try the meatloaf sandwich.
Do you know what that is?
Yes, meatloaf.
What is it? I'm only asking in case I have to describe it later to a doctor.
Look, it's nutritious. It's delicious.
Made out of meat. Add ketchup if you want. I couldn't care less.
Meatloaf Monday. By the way, Dave from Capshaw has already texted in, said he had meatloaf for lunch. So, yay. All right. But that would be pushing buttons on the board right there. That'd be the JP. Hey, man, how you doing?
I'm great. How about you?
I'm good. Played some golf this weekend, I understand.
I did. I also made the mistake of going to Buc-ee's at 11:30 on Saturday, and it was the most chaotic mayhem I've ever seen in my life.
11:30 daytime? 11:30?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. It was a...
What were you thinking?
Well, so I was going by there and needed gas anyways, and thought I'd go and get gas and get a brisket, and the line was almost to the ramp from the interstate to get in. Get into Buc-ee's.
Yeah.
It was
Holy cow.
Unbelievable. So, yeah.
I got something that says that there are better things you could do than wait in line.
Yeah.
But it is Buc-ee's.
It was, a brisket sandwich. Actually, it was a meat 3 sandwich and then some beaver nuggets.
I did that once.
A meat 3 and beaver nuggets was pretty good.
The meat 3 is like, it's several meals inside of a bun.
Yes. So it made it worth it.
Well, you made it back, so that's good.
Yeah.
All right. Good enough. Hey, we got a great show laid on for you. Coming up beginning of hour number 2, a friend of mine, Todd Stacy, who runs Alabama Daily News, is going to be calling in. I'm getting him on because not only does he run Alabama Daily News, which is a private entity, but he also is the host of a show called Capital Journal on public television. So how's the whole thing with public broadcasting affecting him? What's going to happen with the Alabama Public Television overall? I want to know. We'll talk about that as part of a dipper that we're about to announce. I got a triple dipper full of stuff, so hit it, man.
The Triple Dipper. 3 stories you've got to know.
That's right, the Triple Dipper, 3 stories, 3 themes, if you will, that you got to know as we run today's show. First out the gate, public broadcasting. Yep. Should broadcasting be public? By that, I mean paid for by public tax dollars. I'm a big fan of the rescission package that was passed, and I'm looking forward for more. But the defunding of public broadcasting has now resulted, and I'll get into it in more detail, in the Corporation for Public Broadcasting announcing it's going to close its doors entirely. Interesting. What does that do to all of our local stations? Is Sesame Street going away? We'll find out. That's public broadcasting, number 1 on the Triple Dipper. Then number 2, I don't know if you're watching right now, but there is perhaps one of the lamest, aren't we big guy kind of arguments going on right now among Texas Democrats and Democrats in general. They're literally redistricting inside the lines in Texas, and suddenly the Democrats in Texas decided to bolt. It's like that scene from Monty Python, The Holy Grail. Run away, and they're running away. We'll talk about why. We'll talk about what it means, and we'll talk about how does it impact other states. Yep, redistricting, inside the lines. That's number 2 on the Triple Dipper. And then number 3, you're going to hear about it partly in my monologue in a minute, but then if I can get to it, we have a third dipper, obviously, called nanny state politics. Nanny state politics. What is that? That's big government hovering over you like a helicopter mom. That's literally the government going, we know what's best for you in every bit of minutia of your life, and we intend to go ahead and be the nanny state because you can't protect yourself. We have to do it for you. Yeah, we'll talk about what that means. Nanny state politics, number 3 on the Triple Dipper. All right, let me jump on into today's Rightside Way opening monologue. And I'll just remind you guys that attorney Stan McDonald is indeed the daily sponsor of the Rightside Way monologue. A longtime attorney in North Alabama, longtime conservative in North Alabama. And oh, by the way, your daily sponsor of the Rightside Way. I'll tell you more about Stan here momentarily. All right, so I had one of those life moments yesterday. Charlene and I have been weighing some decision-making, the kind that lends itself to prayer and deliberate thinking, the kind of decisions you make on faith and hopefully with wise counsel. But yesterday afternoon, I decided to reach out to my adult kids and ask their opinions on the matter before us. So I did. And both of them gave me great, mature, unvarnished insights, and I was immediately thankful. But I was thankful for not just the fact that I could ask their opinions, but that I could trust their opinions. I mean, think about it. How many people can say that they would turn to their own kids for advice and trust in the words that were spoken? It's a blessing, to be sure. I mean, there was a time when they were raised with Charlene and I making all the decisions for them, right? When to eat, when to sleep, what to wear. All the yeses and the nos of life were decided by us as parents, and that's reasonable. Then came the days, though, when we could leave them to some of their own decision-making on small things, and then bigger things, and then responsibilities, and then setbacks, and then responsibilities again. And then came the day when we trusted them to be out of the house and on their own. And I've said many times that God has blessed us with kids who turned out better than us. And it's okay. It's actually expected for parents to do the parenting, to make the decisions, to hover a bit, to raise up a child in the way they should go, in the belief that when they grow older, they will not depart from it. That's our role as parents. But that is not, oh, by the way, the role of government, not by a stretch. Government provides some essential services, some order and protection and infrastructure. But government should never get over the line into what we sometimes refer to as the nanny state. So let's be very careful. Be very, very careful. Life is hard and decisions are scary. I get that. But don't worry. The government's here to protect you from yourself, right? At least that's what far too many in government believe. Ronald Reagan once famously said the scariest words you could ever hear were, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And listen, there's a role for government. Like I said a moment ago, I'm not so libertarian in my leanings or anarchist in my antipathy towards government that I don't see the need for good governance. And notice that I said good governance. I mean, constitutional governance is designed to ensure life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness by providing for things like the common defense, supporting the general welfare, ensuring domestic tranquility. It's called essential services like police and fire departments, infrastructure, sewage and water, waste disposal. All of that is essential. But when we get into trouble is when government has so much time and money on its hands that it feels like it's necessary to find new ways to justify its own existence. And there's some nanny state jackassery in government that they don't know when to stop. I'm just telling you. A story came out not long ago about Majority Leader Chuck Schumer pushing for a vote that no one called for on a topic that no one saw coming to fill a need that no one has. Schumer and his Democrat colleagues embarked on a classic round of political kabuki theater to pass a bill to enforce a right to contraceptive care. Let that sink in. I mean, never mind the economy, never mind the southern border, never mind the U.S. hostages being held in Gaza. The Democrats wanted to make sure that Americans know they can have birth control pills and condoms whenever they darn well want them, because maybe people don't know that they can already have contraceptives whenever they want them. Because, you know, life is scary without the government getting involved to solve the problems you didn't know you had. So I have to ask, what did we do about contraception before the year 2024 when Democrats held their press conference and cast their votes? I'll tell you what we did. We took personal responsibility. But the nanny state does not thrive on your personal responsibility. It does not. Nanny state jackassery is oftentimes an attempt by big government jackasses to justify their existence without which there would be a loss of their jobs. I mean, if you believed for a second you could make your decisions about your life without their intervention, you silly Americans. You don't know how to buy birth control at the drugstore. But don't worry, we're from the government, and we're here to help. And that, my friends, is an example, yes, of the nanny state. That sense by elected officials and bureaucrats that they can operate with impunity. Because in their own estimation, they are very important. Consequences are not for them. Consequences are for those silly constituents who don't know how important their actions are. Yep, nanny state jackassery. It's a nanny state attitude that causes government to exceed its authority. And sometimes, you know, it's laughable. Like, remember when Mayor Bloomberg up in New York City in 2012 decided he was going to ban large sodas in restaurants? Well, that'll fix obesity. Or how about the town of Fort Lee, New Jersey? Has a no texting and walking law, $85 fine. I get it, but is that really government's role? A few years ago, the state of Tennessee passed a no saggy pants law, really, with penalties and all. No saggy pants. Did they make exceptions for plumbers? About Minnetonka, Minnesota, apparently got tired of cleaning up the streets, passed an ordinance banning muddy vehicles with fines up to $2,000. Muddy vehicles. Okay. Maryland actually has statewide ordinances in effect requiring the use of sunscreen at summer camps for kids. Yep, because sunburn prevention is a surefire role of government, don't you know? How about San Francisco when they grinched out back in 2011 and passed a ban on toys in McDonald's Happy Meals? Unless, of course, they met strict nutritional guidelines with like fruits and vegetables. Kid you not. And then there's Hilton Head, South Carolina, apparently had an issue with rats, passed an ordinance banning trash in cars to keep from attracting those rascally rodents. Trash in cars. They would have to look in your personal vehicle to determine if you had trash. $500 fine, 30 days in jail. Yep. 2008, California Governor Schwarzenegger then went full-on Terminator, and he signed a law banning the use of trans fats to fry foods in the state. You heard me. Fried food must be made healthier, but in the end, it's still fried. One of my other favorites from California came when the law was passed mandating that the hotel industry had to use fitted sheets on the bottom layer of bedding because it was going to save back injuries from those who had to do hospital corners because they treat the rooms and clean them. They also required long-handled tools for bathroom cleaning to prevent back injuries. Have they ever tried to put on a fitted sheet? I mean, that's work in itself. But look, don't think for a second that all the things I'm talking about are just out there somewhere else. Like the nanny state doesn't exist anywhere but other places, because it does exist right here in Red State, Alabama. Oh yeah, yes indeed. How about this? Effective on January 1st of 2024, remember that? The Huntsville City Council, Huntsville, approved a plan foisted upon us by Councilman David Little that far exceeds state law. Police can now issue citations if you are seen with a phone in your hand while driving. The holding of the phone can be the primary offense. It means that you can drive the speed limit, use your blinker, stop at all the stop signs, and still be pulled over because you were on the phone telling your wife what you were picking up for dinner. The first conviction, $50 fine. The second can be up to $100. A third within 24 months, $150 and up to 10 days in jail for a cell phone in your hands. But y'all, if your cell phone rap sheet keeps going, you could face up to 30 days in jail. The Huntsville government, in its wisdom, has presumed guilt by virtue of touching a phone. I mean, never mind that you were driving well at the time, right? And don't worry, by the way, you can hold a coffee cup or a book or surf the playlist on your dash or turn up your music so loud you can't hear the traffic or just eat a biscuit on the way to the office. But by God, don't touch that phone as you cross over the invisible line from Madison to Huntsville. Look, these are all real. They are. And they are also somewhat humorous. They're also examples of big government jackasses getting into office and forgetting their role. Government should provide essential services. Government should not become the nanny state, babysitting your every move like a helicopter mom at a PTA bake sale. Government that gets so far into your personal business that it creates additional issues and then blames you for the problems they created, all while ostensibly taking such action for the greater good, that's a nanny state. That's a nanny state justifying its own existence. It is un-American insofar as our rights and our freedoms are concerned. Yeah, so when you see it, tell them you don't need a nanny, thank you. You've got this covered. Nanny state jackassery, please say hello to Rightside ruffians. We got this. And that's a wrap for the Rightside way. Yeah, I was looking at some stuff that I've got a whole dipper on today, and it reminded me of how pitiful I thought that Huntsville City ordinance was. I'd like to see the stats. Has it saved any lives that they can attribute to people not having phones in their hands? Or have they just made some money to put in the Huntsville coffers? Can't hold a phone, but you can eat a biscuit. Give me a break. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back. Lovely Charlene let me know she's done with buying makeup from Ulta. There you go. Done with buying makeup from Ulta. Well, that's a brick and mortar store, if you're not familiar, that specializes in selling women's makeup and hair care products and all of that. You may recall that in that discussion yesterday, we briefly discussed the fact that Ulta, the national chain of ladies' makeup stores, has decided it would just be a great brand enhancement for them to use a bearded so-called non-binary freak show guy who stars as a stylist on the show Queer Eye as one of their product line sponsors. Well, the online rave of madness was really something, as the new makeup hawker pranced into an Ulta store wearing a silky dress with his long hair and his well-groomed beard, gushing and squealing and using schoolgirl giggles to watch the unveiling of his bearded likeness on a store display. I mean, what in the actual name of all that's real and reasonable was that even about? And let's not look aside from the fact that this is a man. This is a man mocking a representation of women. Real men don't act like that. And by the way, real women don't act like that either. Every time you see a drag queen, keep in mind that what you're seeing is the clown world of the gay community. They mock women by donning garish makeup and flamboyant clothing and enhancing their body parts, and they overhype their mannerisms in a clownish representation of women's behavior. But it's not women. And in truth, these are really not men when you get down to it. Real men don't mock women. Real men don't pretend to be women. Real men don't leave their manhood behind. Well, the war on manhood was already underway, and then Dylan Mulvaney showed up on all places a Bud Light can. Well, the fact that a biological male can be applauded as an influencer for prancing on videos and celebrating 365 days to girlhood is a clear indication something has gone awry. And therein lies part of the problem. It is certainly an issue that there are those who believe or desire to be the opposite sex, but it is made worse by the fawning left-wing media who brands actual manhood as toxic while somehow giving credibility to the incredible actions of used-to-be men who pretend to be women. You can see it in women's sports as dudes now proclaim themselves to be dudettes, and cowards who run sports programs who refuse to look them in the eye and tell them they need psychological help. They just affirm them and then put them in all of the testosterone glory they have into the estrogen pool and let them swim with the girls. Meanwhile, real girls who have trained for years to be at the top of their game risk injury and loss of their dreams because the cowards in our society don't stand up to the imaginations of the progressive left. Look, I read a book a while back. I think I've mentioned it on the show before. It's a small book by best-selling author Stephen Pressfield. Stephen Pressfield, the book's called The Warrior Ethos. Pressfield's actually one of my favorite authors. He wrote the epic historical novel called Gates of Fire about the 300 Spartans who stood in the face of overwhelming odds against the mighty Persian army. But in this other book, The Warrior Ethos, Pressfield takes a chapter at a time to describe such politically incorrect things as duty, honor, and country, having a sense of humor under fire, the essence of courage, a sense of civility and love coming from positions of strength, providing aid and support to the weak and emboldening others. He talks about things like inner wars and outer wars and how to train up young men to be old warriors. Well, these attitudes, these character traits, if you will, many of which are learned behaviors, are not just for soldiers. Truthfully, they're not just for men. I mean, women can have undaunted courage. Women can face crisis with grace and poise. I'm married to a woman like that. I help raise a woman like that. My son is like that, and he's married to a woman like that. But today, for the next couple of minutes, and in the first dipper, today, I'm just going to be talking about men. It's what I know. I am one. I have been for a lot of years. But more than just being biologically male, I was also raised to be a man. I mean, it's possible to be a male and not be manly, right? It's possible to leave behind all that God intended in the male of our species. And by the way, nothing good comes from that, nothing whatsoever. Allie Beth Stuckey, who was a Christian conservative influencer, she wrote a great piece that I've quoted here on the show before. It was titled, Make Men Masculine Again. It's worth the read, by the way. Because like I said, there's a movement on the left to try and neuter manhood, to enshrine the beta male as the role model for our civilized society. And I say hogwash to that. In her article that I really enjoyed, Stuckey made the point that when you try to make men more like women, you don't get less toxic masculinity, you get more. Why? Because in her words, bad men don't become good when they stop being men. They become good when they stop being bad. Aggression, violence, unbridled ambition, she said, they can't be eliminated from the male psyche. They can only be harnessed. And when they're harnessed, they're tools for good, not for harm. Stuckey went on to elaborate then that, quote, the answer to toxic masculinity isn't less masculinity, it's just better masculinity. And we know what that looks like, she said. It's a young man opening the door for a girl on the first date. It's a father working long hours to provide for his family. It's a soldier who's willing to risk his life to defend his country. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. Just saving the world one soundbite at a time. All right. Hey, the text lines are open. It's 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. Some of y'all had experience with Huntsville's nanny state. Don't hold a phone in your hand while you drive. I'd like to know if you had any experiences with it. Just curious. But anyway, yeah, 833-687-4448. 833-68-RIGHT is the number. So let me tell you about Stan McDonald, though, real quick, because I do it all the time, and I got to. Attorney Stan McDonald, partner at the law firm of Wilmer and Lee, 30-year veteran in the practice of law in North Alabama. He's been around for a while practicing, doing great work as an attorney, but he's also, oh, by the way, been a conservative, a policy warrior, a guy out there working hard on the issues that right-side ruffians care about for years. But yeah, as an attorney Stan McDonald has represented his clients in literally thousands of real estate transactions over the years. He knows how to represent you in any local, state, federal court, you name it. I like to say when Stan McDonald's on your side, you're going to have no greater friend. Likewise, your adversaries will have no greater foe. So you need a lawyer in North Alabama. Yes, indeedy. I'm going to tell you how to reach him. You ready? Attorney Stan McDonald. The law firm is Wilmer and Lee. He's an America First family man. Here's his phone number, 256-479-3020. That's 256-479-3020. And tell him you heard about it on Rightside Radio. And my new disclaimer is Stan McDonald's a darn good lawyer. That's my disclaimer. And if you're not as good as he is, get better. How about that?
Sounds pretty good to me. I mean, it's lawyer approved. You're the lawyer, so yeah.
No representation made that the quality of legal services you provide can't be as good as Stan McDonald if you just tried harder. How about that?
And the lawyers finally decide that the lawyers don't need to be getting involved. The lawyers fix their problem with the disclaimer, saying they don't need a disclaimer.
Good point.
Yeah.
I've never seen lawyers actually do it right.
Yeah.
John from Huntsville checked in. He says, Phil, fantastic monologue. Also, John's got his alsos back.
He does.
Also, did you hear that some North Carolina Democratic law firms broke party to pass Republican priorities? Lawmakers, he said. I'm sorry. Lawmakers broke party to pass Republican. By the way, JP, did you know there's only 3 baseball teams worse than your Atlanta Braves?
I'm aware.
He is keenly aware.
Yeah. I mean, there's not much else to add to that. At least we won the Bristol game. So
oh yeah, how was that? Did you watch it?
No, well, because it got rained out Saturday night. It was kind of funny though, because they clearly did not put the field there to hold rain well, because when it rained, the water just sat on the field.
Oh wow!
So they
no drainage whatsoever.
No,
huh?
They postponed it to Sunday morning the next day. So, but yeah, they did not have any rain in their planning. It just sat on the field. It was pretty bad.
So when they play ball at Bristol, I guess you can't camp out in center field like you do when it's center track.
You cannot. Mm-mm.
Interesting. Jeff from Indiana says, "Hey Phil, you think those fines are steep? Do that while driving a semi anywhere. It's a federal law. Here's the breakdown: driver fines up to $2,750 for each offense. Wow. Employer fines: motor carriers can face fines up to $11,000 if they allow or require their drivers to use handheld devices while driving, and you can lose your driving privileges for 60 to 120 days for repeat offenses." Good Lord, that's madness. Then again, y'all are really big. Jack from Huntsville says, "My understanding is that Councilman Little was motivated to pass his law after his own accident and injuries caused by a distracted driver, but I still think it's government overreach." There you go. And then, I'm sorry, that was TL from Huntsville. And then Jack from Huntsville, long text. I'll get back to it here in a minute. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. And the growing problem in today's society, y'all, is not that there are men are too masculine. It's just that they're not masculine enough. Stuckey went on to point out that when men embrace their masculinity in a way that is healthy and productive, they are leaders and warriors and heroes. And when they deny their masculinity, they run away from responsibilities and they leave destruction and despair in their wake. And the consequences can be seen everywhere in our society. So yeah, understand me when I say this. True masculinity is not defined by your age, your status, or your outward appearance. It's a compilation of what I would say are more esoteric things like character, like this warrior ethos I told you about work ethic, about care and concern for others, about self-sacrifice, about courage. And it's the little things sometimes. It's the little things that we need to teach the next generation of men to do better as a matter of muscle memory. Things like standing up to bullies, like speaking out for your beliefs, like sacrificing a little of your me time to go play with your child, like opening the door for your wife, telling her she's the most important person in your life, like paying your employees before you pay yourself, like checking on a friend in need. Again, don't confuse this monologue with some kind of preconceived notion of the poster boy for true masculinity. It's not. You do not have to be the Marlboro Man. You do not have to be a member of SEAL Team 6 or somebody who knows how to spit dip without getting it on your shirt. You can be rough without losing your civility. You can have calloused hands and still wear a tie to work every day. You can be a father separated from your kids and you can still be a daddy to them. So yeah, it's true. The attitude of roughness and masculinity gets often embodied in a mental picture of like harsh ruggedness, right? George Orwell said, people sleep peaceably in their beds at night only because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalf. And yes, in my days, I've known a lot of dudes, a lot of action guys, a lot of operators, members of America's elite special operations, first responders, dudes with grit and determination. And by the way, a lot of them did not fit what you might think to be the visual stereotypical mold. How about that? It's not always how they look on the outside. It's who they are on the inside. Even in the Bible, when he was preparing to crown the future king of Israel, Samuel was taken aback that it would wind up being David, a small guy, the least among his family, and the least among the tribes. But God told Samuel in 1 Samuel 16:7, he said, the Lord sees not as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Look, I don't care if you've never earned a medal. I don't care if you haven't got a penny to your name. I don't care if you have a physical disability. I don't care if you've made mistakes in your past. I don't care about any of that. Hear me when I say this. Society is better off if men will act like men with a sense of masculinity that transcends their outward appearance. If they do that, it will definitely resonate to all around them. So yeah, going back to that article by Allie Beth Stuckey, she concluded better than I could have by saying these things. She said, the devaluation of masculinity won't end well because feminine, passive men don't stop evil. Passive men don't defend or protect or provide. Passive men don't lead. Passive men don't do things we have always needed men to do for society to thrive. She said, rape and murder and war, they all have two things in common. There are bad men who do the raping, murdering, and the warring, and weak men who won't stop them. We need good men who will. She said, it's not masculinity that's toxic, it's the lack of it. So well done. So well put. So yeah, Dylan Mulvaney is not a woman, but he ain't much of a man either. Masculinity is on the rebound, I think. I think it's becoming fashionable, vogue again, to actually say, you know what? Hey, let's get her done. And by the way, in the course of it all, let's remember, be the man. We need it. We need men to be men, to act like men, to lead and to love like men. Our nation and our world is always better when they do. Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. Just covering down on some major ground across the southeast U.S. of A. Y'all don't talk about this show. Goes from like Huntsville back on over to Chattanooga. I'm talking about from Tuscaloosa back on over to Gadsden. I mean, all the way down to that lovely little village on the plains we call Auburn, straight across the border from there to what we call, once again, Fort Benning. And then big old patches. North Georgia and Mississippi all thrown in just for good measure. And that's just the radio. Then there's all y'all out there in the whole wide world streaming live online every day, looking inside the studio at what we got going on, even what color shirt I'm wearing. I'm saying we got people like doing it on Rumble, X, YouTube, Facebook, our website, rightsidemedia.org. And then a ton of y'all podcast after the fact and just, catch it then. And listen, bottom line is, for wherever you catch the show, thank you. We know you're there. We can see the numbers. We thank you. You're the reason why we do what we do. So that's why I try to say that at least several times a show. Jack from Huntsville checked in, said, I watched an interview with a judge some 20 years ago. He was saying it was his duty to find violators, to stupid laws. He said his sworn duty wasn't to change the law as written, just judge the cases before him with the law as it is. He said, if you think a law is stupid, change the law or change the legislators. Wouldn't it be great if legislators did their job and judges did theirs? Yes. And I'm not sure where we're going there, but you're right. I mean, it's a stupid law. And the bottom line is, I think it's going to get challenged at some point. Here's what's going to happen. We're talking about the Huntsville City Ordinance, which is a year old. I get it. The Huntsville City Ordinance that allows the Huntsville PD to pull you over as a primary offense, not like secondary to other things. Like if you're speeding and they also catch you, doing something with your phone. Not even that. They can just see you drive by well within the speed limit, obeying the rules of the road, not appearing distracted, but your phone is in your hand and you're talking on the phone. That's enough. I realize that what they're looking at more often than not is people who are texting while they're driving or, surfing the internet or doing Facebook while they're driving. I get it. But the reality is that's not what the ordinance says. The ordinance says the phone in your hand. You got to use hands-free, everything. Okay, here's the deal. You get pulled over. Officer, I didn't have my phone in my hand. Sir, I saw you with a phone in your hand. Yeah, officer, that was actually not a phone. That was a 3x5 card that I was handing to my person next to me. That was the biscuit that I was eating for breakfast. That was my Pop-Tart. That was my makeup case because I put my makeup on while I'm driving to work every single day, and that's not against the law apparently. And then how about this? It's the cup of coffee that I'm holding in my hands, even right now while I'm talking to you, because I'm not worried about it because it's not against the law. So I can drink coffee, I can eat food, I can put on makeup, I can dial in my radio, I can do all these things. But they're going to get you on that phone. And then they're going to assume that what they saw was a phone, and you have to prove that it wasn't a phone in your hand at the time.
I don't know if it's what I thought it was Alabama, but I just looked it up and I stand corrected. But I think there's some states where eating, like even having a sandwich or anything, any item in your hand while driving is illegal.
Are you seeing that somewhere?
I heard, I thought it was Alabama before, but I just looked it up and I stand corrected. But I did hear that this was a law in some states. I could look it up and see.
I've never heard that, but I'd be fascinated to find out if it's true. Listen, I mean, there's some nanny state stuff going on everywhere. I'll talk more about that when I get to Dipper 3 later. But right now, just your opinions on that ordinance, let me know. I got one texter who I guess for obvious reasons does not want to be identified. Says, I don't want to give my name, but when I worked with some sheriffs in the department in the Alabama dispatch, hang on a second. I don't want to give my name, but when I work with some sheriff's departments in Alabama, dispatch would always call on the cell phone the closest deputy and explain the situation and then get on the radio and announce. Reason being to give the officer a heads up before it went to scanners. So the law needs to be challenged. It's BS. In other words, what she's saying, what this person is saying is that sheriff's deputies are answering their phone in the car because dispatch is the one calling them and then getting it over the scanners, which is interesting, which also means, they're going to have to key the mic and talk on the radio as well. Yeah, it's the whole thing is kind of nuts. All right, let's switch gears. You guys text in. We'll catch up with you as we go through the show. Let me talk about this Corporation for Public Broadcasting situation. So I got a story here that broke over the weekend. I pulled this one directly off of the website of corporationforpublicbroadcasting.org. It's their official announcement dated Friday afternoon. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting announced today it will begin an orderly wind down of its operations following the passage of a federal rescissions package and the release of the Senate Appropriations Committee, blah, 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 which excludes funding for the CPB for the first time in more than 5 decades. What are we talking about? NPR and PBS are both subsidiaries of the parent organization, which is the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which was formed back in, I think, 1967 by act of the legislature. It was formed at a time when it had more purpose than what it is deemed to have now, but at the same time, it was also formed with an intent that it would be bipartisan, and it has become decidedly left-leaning over the last few years. It's a complete mess right now, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is literally just lost its mission, if you will. So that being said, and by the way, JP, go ahead and tell our caller. I'll have to get him later if you don't mind. I'm going to have to go forward because I have a caller coming in just a minute. But the Corporation for Public Broadcasting winding down. See, this is one thing that's interesting. We didn't expect this part. So I'm curious, is this them getting mad, taking their ball and going home? Or is this actually they have a need to shut down because they can't afford life anymore? Was it literally that we were carrying them completely. So that being said, they lost their funding in a rescission package, which, if you remember, that's the government saying, hey, we spent that money or we appropriated that money, but we're going to claw that back. We're not going to do that after all. And so that once it's been passed by Congress, it takes Congress to undo it. And so they did. $9.4 billion in the rescission package most recently, and they got it done. And that rescission package included public broadcasting. So what we're looking at right now is CPB, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, informed its employees that by the close of this fiscal year, into September, I mean, we're talking 60 days, a small transition team will remain, but the rest of the staff will be laid off. So what does this do for us watching Sesame Street at the local level? Well, the problem's really not been Sesame Street. Although I will admit, Sesame Street got kind of dicey at times in recent years. Yeah. But right now, what we're watching is $1.1 billion in funding was just removed from the public square. NPR, though, says it only receives about 1% of its operating budget from the federal government. The remaining budget comes from all kinds of like corporate sponsorships. How many times have you seen it? NPR is brought to you, or heard it. NPR is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and so donors and so class donors and so corporation. And people like you. They say that all the time. You see it on PBS too. You watch Sesame Street and there'll be like a little run in between, right when the commercials would normally go. They'll tell you how they get their funding. And they'll even ask you at times to do, with a telethon version, they'll ask you to support public broadcasting. Where they're saying you're going to see the most change is at the grassroots level. So you've got the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, that's the big parent umbrella. Then you had the two subsidiaries, PBS TV and NPR radio. They are still corporations that don't receive the bulk of their funding from the federal government. However, you're still going to see all of the little stations down below, some of which are very rural and all that, that are going to be challenged. And I got to be honest, y'all, that's the free market. That's the whole build a better mousetrap thing. So I guess my question is, when it comes to your local broadcasters, when it comes to the station in Podunk, Alabama, when it comes to the station in, the backside of Egypt, Tennessee, when it comes to that small rural station that's been broadcasting Sesame Street or Antiques Roadshow or whatever else, or the radio station that has a radius of about 30 miles and it gets the message out on NPR's All Things Considered. Is that going away? Maybe. It may. But the question is, do the people locally want it? Because if they do, they have an opportunity to support it. Can they support it? I don't know. Then you get into the question of, all right, why are federal tax dollars doing this when states have their own budgets? Well, not every state's got a big budget. Oh, look at what states spend money on. And if it's important, then I will tell you, like Alabama Public Television is going to be looking at making up a gap, hopefully through their state budget, I'm sure. I guarantee you. I'm sure the lobbying has already begun. But this is where the free market kicks in. This is where the better mousetrap is there. This is where the government subsidizing something, as soon as the government pulls its money away, if it collapses, that means it was either too dependent on the government and never did a thing otherwise, which is part of the problem, or B, it was a lousy product in the first place and it's not supportable once the free market is in play. So all that to say, if these rural stations that you're hearing Democrats scream about right now, if these rural stations are going to survive, it's going to be because the communities actually want them. And then they're going to have to go out and do it like a business. And they're going to have to raise their own funds, like to do like Rightside does. They're going to have to raise their own funds, go for their own capital investment, do what they can to develop their own messaging, and they're going to have to grow something that the people of the community, A, want, and B, support. Sell ads on radio, do all the things, because y'all, that's what makes it work. All right, we're going to take a break right now. We'll come back from this break and we'll jump into this a little bit further I got some text messages coming through, and then, yeah, we will catch up with somebody who knows it really well, my friend Todd Stacy at the top of the hour. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. Equity, inclusion. Did you get sick of those words during the last few years? I pretty much did. Yeah, diversity, equity, and inclusion. 3 innocent words that have developed what may be a very sinister meaning. I mean, there's a strong movement underway right now, led by Republican state legislators, to include right here in Alabama and in Tennessee, to abolish DEI practices in government offices and in public education. Basically, though, in some states now, if you want to receive your annual appropriation for the state budget, you better get away from those practices that exhibit favoritism and race baiting based on a person's skin color, sexual identity, or so-called underrepresentation. We're seeing it right now as a strong movement from the federal government as well. The Trump administration has issued orders to the whole of government, including the U.S. military, to disband DEI offices and to stop DEI practices. No more pronoun seminars, no more hiring preferences, no more inclusion memos and passing over the best candidates for the most woke candidates. DEI is truly where merit has gone to die. It is. Y'all, when somebody's appearance or their lifestyle or their claims of victimization are the top lines on their resume, the job will suffer. Why? Because it means they're not rewarding productivity and achievement. It means that success of the mission is secondary to the feelings of the employees, which means that the mission could actually fail. But hey, the boss will feel good about themselves for giving some poor, downtrodden, unqualified wretch a very important position, though, right? Virtue signal all the way to mediocrity. I hope you've all seen the movie Hidden Figures. I hope you have. It's an amazing true story. The movie starred Octavia Spencer, Kevin Costner, and a cast of greats. The efforts to combat racism in the early days of NASA's Apollo, that's the whole Apollo mission set. That's what the movie's about. And the best mathematician in NASA at the time was a lady named Catherine Goebel, a black woman. But because of her skin color, her work was deemed unfit until one day her calculations actually won the approval of her boss, and then they won the approval of astronaut John Glenn. Yeah, she was the best. But her merit was being suppressed because her supervisors were too busy looking for one skin color on the job. We'll flip that script to today, and we've come full circle. The effort to allegedly overcome the racism and marginalism of the past is not met with cries to always promote the best, no matter what their skin color. Oh no, the race baiters and charlatans of today are back to the days of meritless work environments based only on lifestyle and skin color, and thus merit fades into obscurity like some weird scene from Idiocracy. Well, just the other day, it was discovered that the Boston Police Department is in a recruiting drive for Muslim officers because, you know, everyone knows your religious preference is key to being a good cop. And when you dial 911, you want to first ask what the religion is of the first responder, right? No. Or how about in King County, Washington, not long ago, when a DEI training session for firefighters was suspended when it became centered on the notion that white first responders were somehow dangerous. Let's just say the firemen were having none of it. Not long ago, a school board meeting in Pennsylvania got kind of DEI weird when one of the members openly stated she could not support one individual for the position as president of the board because, here's her quote, she said it on the open record, he was the only cis white male running, so she couldn't support him. Even though she acknowledged he would likely do a good job, she thought it would send the wrong message. Yeah, she was compelled to resign a few days later. And you may recall the story. I told it about a year and a half, 2 years ago, about the Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Mathematics. One of the most renowned high schools in the nation, apparently. The administration there had become so woke that they began withholding information from students who became national merit scholars. Can you imagine that? You or your child with long years and grueling hours of study, earning the right to be named as a national merit finalist or semifinalist, a fact that, by the way, can make all the difference in the competitive world of college admissions. And that school deliberately refused to make it known. Why? Because they say it clashed with the new Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Mathematics equitable grading standards. Equitable grading standards. Basically, the pinheads in charge of Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Mathematics were concerned that if one student excelled, that other students would feel badly about themselves. So in their narrow, woke-minded view, they just chose to dumb down everyone instead of allowing merit or excellence to rise to the top. I mean, this all sounds like fiction, right? It does. It sounds a lot like fiction, but it's not. But there was a fictional story that somebody brought to my attention not long ago. I'd forgotten about it. The story is called Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut was a prolific writer of science fiction. Harrison Bergeron is actually a short story he wrote in 1961, maybe only 6 pages long. And wow, is it on point. Let me read you a few lines. You ready? Here's how it opened. The year was 2081, and everybody was finally equal. They weren't only equal before God and the law. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right. I'm just talking about, wow, making common sense like a superpower. All right, so I'm in this section on public broadcasting. Coming up here in a few minutes, I'll come back from the next break. And a friend of mine, Todd Stacy, will be on with us to talk about it. And he's not just a news guy himself. He owns Alabama Daily News. You can check out their stuff at aldailynews.com. In fact, I think a couple of my stories today have come from them. But the other piece of this is he actually is the host of Capitol Journal, which is a Alabama public television show that I've been on several times. And I'm questioning what's going to happen because I've got a story. Hang on a second. Let me weed through my stack and see, because some of these articles all say the same thing. I realize. All right. We've got right here story from 1819 News. Another guy that I know, Alan Mendenhall, good dude. He's very conservative. He's been on the Alabama Public Television Foundation Board, and the Foundation Board are the ones who make the financial decisions for APTV. So he just recently resigned. This story is dated July 12th, so it's about 3 weeks old. But Mendenhall resigned from the APTV Foundation Board because he said, I support President Trump's rescission package and the rescinding of funding for public television, but given my support, I don't think I can serve in good faith as a fiduciary for the organization. In other words, what he's saying is, and good on him for this, hey, I support defunding what I'm on the board to talk about doing. So how about I step back? Because obviously all of y'all probably, I guarantee what was happening was he was openly supportive of it. And the people on the board were like, stop it. You can't do that. And he's like, okay, I'll resign. In his letter of resignation, Mendenhall said the decision stems from philosophical, legal, and policy differences related to the litigation challenging President Donald Trump's executive order directing federal agencies. In other words, he was saying, I'm not a part of that. But then here's a piece of the article that I wanted to bring up too. According to one Alabama public television executive, if the U.S. Senate approves, which they did, this is right before they did, the rescission package, APT would lose $3 million annually, which is 13% of their budget. That's a chunk. I guarantee it's a chunk. I know it's a chunk. 13%, $3 million. You know what $3 million is for the state budget? If the state legislators want this for their state of Alabama, if they want this for the state of Alabama, $3 million is a nothing burger. I know it's a lot of money to me and you. Oh, JP, the things we could do for Rightside with $3 million.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I mean, $3 million is enough for the state of Alabama to just throw away down the drain. No problem.
We have that in the couch cushions in the state house. I'm pretty sure it's just laying around. You can find it in like the backside of the stalls in the bathrooms.
Yeah,
it's everywhere. But $3 million, if they want it that bad, they will make up the difference at the local level. It's time for the federal government to pull out. And then you're going to wind up having, you're going to have the knives are going to be out. Well, who gets cut? Wait, I got news. Alabama's in a budget surplus. Now, California, they're not. They're in a budget deficit. And they're freaking out over this. You know why? Because they're big government people out there, and they wanted the messaging of subsidized TV and radio. And they wanted the fact that it blared out a leftist-leaning propaganda piece every third hour. And they're screaming about it. I haven't heard a lot of screaming in Alabama, but I'm not saying that there's not going to be some angst. I myself, like I said, have been on Capitol Journal with Todd Stacy, who'll be on in a few minutes. Good show. There's no other place where you can just have that level of sit down, and just dialogue about a bill that's before the Senate or something like that. You get some good stuff off of state run media. Really sounded bad, upon state level public television. But then the question is going to become, do we keep subsidizing it? Because if you notice, it says in this article, Alabama public television is losing $3 million, which is 13% of its budget. Where's the rest of it come from? Other places, foundations, grants, means by which they can raise money. Maybe they have to spend some money on hiring someone to do more deliberative fundraising. Maybe they start, having to sell their ads at a different rate. Maybe they have to cut back their staff. I don't know. But maybe what's going to wind up happening is they're going to start having to run it even more like a business. I'm not saying they haven't made business-like decisions, but most of what they've been able to do has been considered to be quasi-public sector. And there's usually not a true business-like atmosphere in a public sector anything. Just saying. How will it impact your local stations? I got a piece here off of the Hill. I hold it in my calloused former paratrooper hands. Dateline July 18th. So we're right at 2.5 weeks. It talks about a number of places like, how about this one? KUHB in St. Paul, Alaska, located on a small island in the Bering Sea, and KCUK in Shivak, Alaska. Those stations will be forced to close by next summer if CBP shuts down. Okay. So without them, that community doesn't have anything, said one official. There's no local TV. There's no local newspapers. Some of them barely have internet still to this day. Again, if the locals really want it, they will have to find a way.
I don't know. I feel like I don't get any alert. Okay, I understand I'm not living in a rural area like those places, but I feel like they all come from my phone. I feel like the iPhone gives alerts like crazy for weather stuff. So I understand some people may not have, iPhones or whatever. I understand that, but I feel like that's just such a marginal part of the population nowadays. I hate to say it, but it's like, okay, are we going to accommodate for the 4% of, not even that, of people who don't have iPhones or something like that strictly get their alerts from radio? It's just like, I don't think that's worth it to throw constant money at it.
Well, here's the thing. It goes back to that's Alaska.
Yeah.
All right. Does the Alaska legislature want to go, you know what? Hey, guys, we need that because Alaska's different. I mean, you got to fly from one place to the next over there. But here, you and I get in a car, we can drive. There ain't no roads. I get it. Okay. So let's say they really, really, really want that radio station. Alaska needs to do it. It doesn't need to come from DC. Yeah. And then you got this one. CPB funding in 2023 accounted for nearly 97% of KUHB's revenue. 97%. Y'all, I mean, I'm looking, and that's all said and done. I got story after story, but then it says this. He says, the guy says, more revenue you generate, the safer you are. That doesn't mean you're necessarily completely safe. Well, yeah, that's called business. That's why you generate revenue. But they've not had to up until now. We'll talk to Todd Stacy and get the straight skinny on what he thinks is going to happen. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. Equal every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. All the equality was due to the 211th, 212th, and 213th Amendments to the Constitution and to the unceasing vigilance of the agents of the United States Handicapper General. Wow. The story goes on, by the way, to describe the very average lives of George and Hazel Bergeron. It describes Hazel as being of average intelligence, but George was actually determined to be very intelligent. So the government office of the Handicapper General, they made him wear a device that blasted erratic noises in his ears every few minutes to keep him from having clear and cogent thoughts that might make him excel over that of others. In the story, it was described as a sharp noise to keep people like George from taking unfair advantage of their brains. George and Hazel sat watching a ballet on TV in the story, but each of the dancers, based upon their individual skills, were saddled with bags of birdshot tied to their waist to weigh them down so that nobody could dance better than the other. And each one of the dancers had to wear masks so that nobody could be more beautiful than the other. Well, the title character was Harrison Bergeron. He was the son of George and Hazel. But the Office of the Handicapper General, they had removed him from their home as their son. They took their son out of the home when he was 14 because he was too perfect. He was too attractive. He was too athletic. He was too smart. Nobody should have a child that much better than anyone else. Harrison was featured in the story as the anti-equality character, and I won't try to spoil it for you by telling you what happened next, but it was spot on. Spot on. The story of Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut sounds creepy, and yet you can compare the same attitude to what we see in the ridiculous decisions by people in charge of places like the Thomas Jefferson School for Science and Mathematics. Let me tell you, when those in charge become determined to suppress excellence in favor of equity, then failure becomes the norm and success becomes a crime. Let me say that again with as much emphasis as I can. When those in charge become determined to suppress excellence in favor of equity, then failure becomes the norm and success becomes a crime. Make no mistake, I'm not for discrimination. I'm not for trying to keep someone down because of their race, sex, religion, or pregnancy, but the race to DEI is not that. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, those are just synonyms for refusing to allow any one person's merit to be the guide to their ability to serve or succeed. It's farcical to think for a second that good will come of giving someone a job or a title or a security clearance or a scholarship or some power over others merely because they checked off a DEI box and not because they were the best candidate for the job. Cases in point. Think over the last few years. Remember Samuel Brenton? Oh, yeah. Samuel Brenton, the cross-dressing, non-binary, radical kink fetish lecturer, should never have been given a top secret clearance or access to sensitive government information. It was wrong and it failed. How about Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, an extremely accomplished jurist and with a sound legal mind? She should never have been put in the position of having an asterisk by her appointment to the Supreme Court of the United States merely because she was a Black woman. She may well have earned it otherwise, but President Biden tainted her by announcing that DEI was his first motive in selecting her. And then there's even on the Republican side. Remember George Santos? Should have never been elected to Congress from the state of New York because he habitually lied about his own resume in an effort to be something that he's not. Well, Santos is gone now. He's in jail now. Removed from office by his peers in the House, Santos is a product of a society that believes that no one is okay the way God made them. You have to be adjusted. You have to be able to show something different than just achieving things on your merit. So yeah, DEI, y'all, that's where merit goes to die. When we allow ourselves to believe for a minute that no one is allowed to be the person that God intended them to be, or to exercise their own gifts or talents or personal disciplines in such a way as to earn a position, then we have become something like, nothing more than a society filled with empty, average characters like George and Hazel Bergeron, saddled up with bags of birdshot and noisemakers so that no one person can rise to their personal best. DEI, that's where merit goes to die and where failure becomes acceptable. Last night, I had the honor of attending the Take Back Alabama Town Hall hosted by Moms for Liberty at Movement Church in Madison. Great time. Had a great group of folks there. Thank you to Pastors Seth and Lori of Movement Church for the willingness to host the event. Thank you to Emily Jones of Moms for Liberty, who spoke on building families, followed by Mark McEthron, who championed the concepts of federalism. And then I also spoke, and then I hosted a town hall event session with Jared Hudson, the former Navy SEAL who's now running for U.S. Senate. So as Jared and I were sitting together waiting to go up on stage, though, I heard a text come in on my phone. And I looked down to see that the lovely Charlene had just sent word about an active shooter incident in downtown Manhattan. So by now, you've likely all heard the news that a depraved individual drove to the heart of New York City, walked calmly into a downtown high-rise with an AR rifle, killed 5 people, and then took his own life. And nobody really knows why. There is some speculation, but it's still being kind of unfolded. It struck me later, though, that I was sitting there when I got word of this with Jared Hudson, who's a good guy, who teaches other good guys how to handle firearms, how to conduct close quarters battle drills through his business, the Shooting Institute. So I've got this Navy SEAL sitting next to me who teaches at the Shooting Institute, and then somewhere else there was a bad guy who took up arms and committed heinous acts of terror. One is a decorated Navy SEAL who has handled the same type firearm that was used in the crime last night more times than he could likely count, trained as a sniper even, a firearms instructor who trains law enforcement and military personnel. The other was a bad guy using the exact same type firearm in order to perpetrate mayhem and destruction. My point is, it was the user of the weapon, not the weapon itself. But the calls are already out there to blame guns, just the guns, blame the inanimate object. The dust is still settling in Manhattan. The news is still raw, but at the risk of sort of being too soon on the topic, I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. I know it's raw right now, but I want to talk about the fact that it's not the guns that are scary. It's the people that are scary. Let's not forget the heroism of a man named Derek Perry, a former Marine who just last week in Michigan pulled out his concealed carry firearm and saved innocent bystanders from being attacked by a knife-wielding madman who had just stabbed multiple other people at random. That was a good guy with a gun stopping a bad guy. And the press isn't talking about that much, are they? Not so long ago, the liberal governor of New Mexico, who most of us had never even heard of, took the extreme step of deciding on her own to issue an executive proclamation of emergency. A healthcare emergency, she said. A healthcare related to, wait for it, gun violence. A healthcare emergency on gun violence. Well, that's novel. Can we also declare a healthcare emergency related to sitting around and watching too much TV? Can we declare a healthcare emergency because too many just said solid, conservative, and just plain right? Well, welcome to hour number 2 on a Meatloaf Monday, because it's always about the food. You know that. Meatloaf Monday. Well, listen, I'm in Dipper number 1 of the day here. I'm talking about public broadcasting. Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the parent organization, the big umbrella, if you will, that had covered down on NPR and PBS all these years, announced on Friday it will shut its doors after the rescission bill passed in D.C., and they lost over $1 billion in funding. What does that mean out at the local level? Do we get to see Sesame Street anymore in Alabama? I don't know. Let's bring on somebody who does know more about it than I do. Todd Stacy. Todd Stacy and I have known each other for a few years. He's the founder and publisher of Alabama Daily News. You can see them daily on aldailynews.com. But Todd Stacy has a long career, 15 years, I believe, somewhere in politics in D.C. Used to work for Congresswoman Martha Roby. He spent time working in the State House, and he is now running daily AL Daily News. Todd Stacy, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. And by the way, one thing I forgot to mention in my overly long intro was you're also the host of Capital Journal on Alabama Public Television. So there. How about that?
Right. Yeah. I figure that you probably want to talk more about that than you do daily news.
Well, it all blends together sometimes, but listen, man, let me get your thoughts on it. Give me the broad brush perspective. First of all, I saw one report that said that APTV, Alabama's public television, could lose up to $3 million in funding. What do you know? What's going to happen?
That's right. And I have to caveat this at the beginning that I may not know as much as a lot of folks do or others do that are in the organization. I host Capital Journal. I manage the news side of things, and that's my job. I try to stick to that. I don't get into budget discussions. It's not really appropriate, for me to. But I mean, it's just been so public, and I've talked with folks, and I can do my best. Obviously, with the rescissions package, yes, that in the end results in about $3 million over 2 years from Alabama Public Television. And the way that works is Congress allocates funding to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and that is like the pass-through entity. That's the entity that gives grants to everybody else, from NPR to PBS and all of the more than 100 local public media stations. So that's our cut. And that's about 13% of the overall budget, which is nobody would do well with that. It's a concern. There's talking with our executive director, Wayne Reed, he comes from the commercial side. There's just a lot of uncertainty. They're going to have to do things differently. That maybe some silver linings there in terms of some more local programming, some more state focused programming. Maybe there are some decisions to make about, some of the programming coming down from national. I mean, we, have quietly had complaints for years about NPR is the true. They've just gone off the rails.
Yeah.
But PBS too, in many ways, especially on the news side, NewsHour and Washington Week. Washington Week is pretty egregious. So one thing I didn't know is that Jack Williams, who you also served with,
right,
who works for APT, he's been making that case to NPR, to CPB, to PBS, like, hey, y'all are killing us. Y'all's insistence on adhering to this far left ideology and just doing nothing but attack Trump all day, you're killing us, because eventually this is going to come home to roost, and it has.
Well, and I think it definitely did. I mean, and they finally wore out their welcome to the point that they were no longer welcome. So, all right, 13% of the budget, that's a huge whack. I mean, I can see where that had been painful on day one. But let me ask you this. First of all, does APTV, to your knowledge, do they also receive funding through private donations and other things, kind of like the Corporation for Public Broadcasting did? Do they receive their funding through any state resources? I don't even recall from my days in the legislature if APTV is in the budget, but I seem to recall that they are. What's your recollection on that? That's what I thought.
Okay. It is. It's both. It's both. So now, in Alabama public television, just like a lot of smallish state public broadcasting, doesn't get nearly the percentage in private contributions from viewers like you that stations in New York or Boston or huge markets and everything like that. So yes, it is in the ETF. It's in the Education Trust Fund. That's because a big part of what APT does is education based. As a matter of fact, before I came on as host of Capital Journal, I didn't know how much went on in the education space. So all that's in the Education Trust Fund. But now there are, you could see that change over time. Maybe there are maybe it's a more general fund thing, but as you know, the general fund has traditionally just not had the same flexibility. So yeah, there's a line item. It's there, every year, and we work hard to justify that and make it stretch, which I think we're going to have to this time.
Well, so what do you think, man? Are we going to lose Sesame Street in Alabama? Are we going to see
No.
programming continue? Is APTV going away? What's your thought on that?
No, not at all. Goodness, I don't know what would happen if Sesame Street complaints would mount up. But that goes back to what I kind of briefly mentioned about programming decisions. So part of that $3 million I mentioned, a lot of that ends up going back to PBS. It's kind of this weird system that I've recently learned about that. So APT has to turn around and pay PBS for certain programs.
Wow.
And so if some of that goes away, then maybe we'll be in a different spot. And Sesame Street has its own program for which you pay. So I'm absolutely sure whether it's Sesame Street or Daniel Tiger and all the other education-based, whether it's state or national, those are incredibly popular, and you won't see anything like that happen. But no, ABC is not going anywhere. And a lot of people don't know that Alabama public television is the first public television that was ever started in this country. It preceded PBS by more than 15 years. So it's been around and going to continue to.
Well, and I suspect that's true. I made the point earlier before you came on that, one of the Crimea River stories that I pulled off the hill was how small radio stations, in this case, NPR-based radio stations, like in the Bering Sea area in Alaska, are the only thing they say that some people even have. And okay, well, I get it, but what's going to wind up happening is, in a federalist sense, so to speak, if the states want this to remain, then the states will find a way to make up the difference, or the private sector will jump in and say, we got to support the local station. That's going to wind up having to be sort of the build a better mousetrap version of running a business than being subsidized by the federal government. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I think like for something like PBS, I've not seen any reporting, but I would be surprised if they didn't have just a huge influx of donations from their base. And I also suspect that there's kind of audience capture going on, just like everywhere else. Everybody does it to a certain extent, but let's just say that PBS had changed their tune, had said, okay, you know what, we're just going to be fair and stop this, this left-leaning tendency. Well, then that would have really irritated a lot of their audience, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy to it. So I don't think you're going to see that be a problem that's the kind of the interesting thing about it is the target is NPR and the target is PBS. And yet they're going to be fine because they have just an enormous fundraising base. What the unanticipated target was, stations like APT. That's okay. It's going to happen. There are talks about treating those entities differently. I think there was a lot of interest in doing that this time because a lot of lawmakers there on the Hill, we heard from all the time, we love APT. We like our local and state folks that are fair and just do it right. We don't like NPR and PBS, but unfortunately, the way the funding work was so intertwined, there wasn't enough time to figure it out. That doesn't mean that they won't try to do something like that in the future. They're just going to have to figure out a different pass-through mechanism, because that was the role that CPB served.
Well, and I think it's interesting. I mean, we're watching CPB close its doors. They say they're winding down like within the next 60 days. I mean, this is going to be like they're shutting down pretty quick by all rights. You can look at Trump sort of dismantling the Department of Education, and yet it's going down, clawing and scratching and filing suits and everything else. CPB seems to have read the handwriting on the wall and decided that their charter is over, and they're just going to go ahead and call her done. And then NPR and PBS will be, I guess, set free to do what they do and to survive the way every other business survives. I think it's going to be interesting to watch. I think it's also probably time. But I know at the same time, there's going to be some pain. I will say this, $3 million, that's the loss to APT. You and I both know there's that much in the couch cushions in the State House. They can find $3 million if they wanted to make up the difference at the local level.
Well, yeah, and again, I don't really get into that. It's not really appropriate for me to.
Sure.
We do our job, and I'm very proud of what we do at Capital Journal. I'm completely confident that we don't have any kind of bias. I mean, you know me well enough to know that just the fact that I'm the host is pretty telling of the idea that it's not going to be left leaning. We're just trying to tell the truth, and there is no really statewide news focus on the legislature and on Congress and things like that. So it is filling a need, but it also comes with and that would be tough to do from a commercial side. I'm not sure you could get the kind of ad revenue. That's why the program's been along like it has. And so we're just going to keep doing that. The questions about funding, that's, over my head. But we've been having a lot of success at Capital Journal with growth, doing interesting things, getting around the state. We're about to go back to the Business Council conference this weekend. So that's what we're focused on, just doing a good job telling the truth and really just helping tell Alabama's story. And we got a lot of good feedback from the legislature. That's our job, and that's what I'm going to be focused on.
Well, listen, we'll keep posted, and if anything new happens, we'll holler back at you and see if you can give us the straight skinny on it. But for right now, Todd Stacy, founder and publisher of the Alabama Daily News at aldailynews.com. We appreciate your time, man.
You bet.
All right, take care. All right, you guys, listen, we're going to take a break. We're going to come right back. I saw some breaking news a moment ago on the screens here in the studio that I'll be telling you about in case you hadn't already seen it. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back. Eaten, or because the sun is shining too brightly, or because too many people are offended by those who don't want to use their imaginary pronouns? I mean, where exactly does it stop then with so-called healthcare emergencies? But as many of you already know, this was not really about healthcare, was it? Nope. It was about gun control. It was about making sure the citizens of her state knew that she was the boss, and that in her own words, none of their civil liberties are absolute. Really? To include the Second Amendment right to bear arms. But you see, it still matters if someone is acting in self-defense, and it still matters that when leadership abdicates its authority and allows anarchy to reign at the risk of life, limb, and property, that good people will get hurt. And it's good guys with guns who stop bad guys with guns all the time, but they don't want to talk about that. Well, by now you may have figured out that I'm a gun guy. I mean, it's hard to come from the background and training that I've had and not be. But it's not just my military training or the fondness for things that go bang. It's also the fact that I'm a firm believer in the originalist, sometimes called strict constructionist, view of the U.S. Constitution, which includes, by the way, that good old Second Amendment as number 2 on the Bill of Rights. So I've watched the New Mexico governor with a wary eye, and sure enough, the gun control advocates began latching onto it. It's the usual rhetoric. Guns are evil. They're assault weapons, weapons of mass destruction. Well, I got news. People went to war with knives and swords and spears and arrows for centuries. Where are the calls to ban those implements of destruction? So let's be clear where I'm going here. Firearms are not scary. It's people that are scary, period. If firearms make you uncomfortable, I understand that. If you're averse to the loud noises caused by the report of a round exiting the barrel of any firearm, that is certainly understandable. But in my estimation, aside from noise and a general lack of familiarity, most people are more concerned about the manner in which a firearm is used, maintained, or handled. And those, my friends, are issues of a purely human fault, not the fault of the firearm itself. Look, I've spent hours and hours on many ranges, both civilian and military. And in both cases, I have never minded the strict observance of basic gun safety procedures, like the use of eye and ear protection, the respect of others while they're on the firing line. I've also, oh, by the way, been the victim of those that have a lesser degree of care and concern. I can show you right now the surgical scars on my left leg that resulted from somebody being lax with firearm safety, sweeping a loaded shotgun back off the range just feet from me and shooting me. After surgery and months of rehab, I was back to full strength. I went back to the range too, at the next available opportunity. Despite getting shot by one of those evil firearms, I was actually able to separate the causation from the instrument. It was not the shotgun that shot me in and of itself. It was the knuckle-headed laxity of the guy who shot me who should have known better. So are guns scary? Not in and of themselves. People are scary. But gun control activists, to them, it's all about the weapon itself. They don't give two hoots about the people. They're fixated on the inanimate object that cannot load itself, aim itself, or even fire itself. Me personally, I'll tell you, I'm not a big hunter myself, never have been, no real reason. I just didn't grow up in a hunting family, but I am more of a sport shooter. I enjoy sunny days on the range, firing at both known distance and unknown distance targets. I love shooting sporting clays and watching that orange disc just evaporate in the air when you lead it just right. I enjoy the opportunity to spend time on a short range practicing magazine changes and dual weapons drills, going from long gun to sidearm and back again. I love the sound of ding on a metal target when you shoot it. And I'm no expert on every grain or quality of round, not at all. I have friends who are every bit the expert that I'm not. But I'm competent and I'm law-abiding, and I do enjoy shooting sports. And do I own firearms? Certainly. All kinds. Some for use and some just for sentimentality, like the old Winchester 30-30 lever action that belonged to my grandfather. I've got breech load, bolt action, magazine fed, and pump. I've got holographic sights, iron sights, and no sights. Holstered, unholstered, and slung, long guns, sidearms, and scatter shots. And what I just described, by the way, is no different than the majority of gun owners in this nation. The vast majority of folks who own a firearm are good, solid, law-abiding dudes and dudettes who have one or more firearms for sport, hunting, or just personal defense. And contrary to the rhetoric of the gun-scary crowd, not one of those firearms ever leaped out of someone's care, loaded itself, and committed a violent act. Look, I could go on, but in short, guns are not scary. It's people that are scary. And good people with guns are what often stands between potential victims and bad people with guns. And do not forget, the Second Amendment to the Constitution guarantees that your right to bear arms shall not be infringed. They didn't write that it may not be infringed. They said shall not be infringed. And they didn't write it to say, but not for magazine-fed weapons. No, they just knowingly and with forethought said shall not be infringed and left it at that. In my view, the First and Second Amendments were the first and second for a reason. Those two amendments. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid conservative, just plain right. Just pulling pins on truth grenades in here. That's what we're doing. So some breaking news just came out, and I got to jump on it real quick and let you know because we're talking about it in the last few minutes. So in the last few minutes, it has been announced that the Department of Justice, Attorney General Pam Bondi, has received Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard's criminal referrals on the Russiagate collusion issue and has now convened a grand jury. So a grand jury investigation is about to get underway. What does that mean? So for those who don't already know, a grand jury is the impaneled group of citizens who are then presented evidence by a prosecutor, and the grand jury then votes on whether there's enough there to issue an indictment. It sort of takes things out of the hands of the government, if you will. It sort of puts things into a checks and balances moment. There's the old saying, you can indict a ham sandwich. I mean, the rules of evidence are different in grand jury. They're not required to be as detailed. They can get away with some things that they might not, otherwise do. You got to watch. You got to literally watch prosecutorial abuse. You just do. At the same time, it's also a very important process. It's also the first layer in what could wind up being criminal indictments. So this is a whole new day. And for those of y'all that have been saying, when's somebody going to jail? You're watching the process unfold. Keep in mind, Trump has not even been in office but about 6 months. And now they have found the documents. And now they have referred to the DOJ. And now they have convened a grand jury. So yes, a grand jury investigation just launched. In the last hour, it was announced. Attorney General Pam Bondi, says Fox News, directed her staff on Monday to act on the criminal referral from DNI Tulsi Gabbard related to the alleged conspiracy to tie President Donald Trump to Russia. Bondi ordered an unnamed federal prosecutor. We don't know who it's going to be yet. It'll probably come out at some point, but then again, it might wind up being part of the grand jury secrecy, which, by the way, is a very secret proceeding. You're not allowed to have leaks from the grand jury. You're not allowed to have press conferences. You're not allowed to go interview the impaneled members of the grand jury. And also, by the way, what's said in the grand jury is supposed to be confidential because, keep in mind, it's talking about people in a way that may not result in an indictment, but would certainly indict them in the public eye. And you just don't do that. You don't ruin lives. You don't destroy people on something that has not become actionable at law. But I'm going to tell you right now, what we do understand is that some of the names being floated, keep in mind who Tulsi Gabbard referred. That means she found something she thought was so serious she had to give it over to law enforcement or prosecutors. She had to turn it in. So the formal process of referral was also important. Sometimes the DOJ finds things on their own. Other times, though, it comes to them by referral. It's the same thing at the local level. If I see a crime, if you stumble across something in the middle of a lawsuit and you realize, holy cow, that person embezzled money. You go to the DA and you say, hey, I got a thing. I think I'm going to have to go ahead and say this has gone into a criminal proceeding. And they'll look at it and decide. Same thing true at the federal level. Things are found. They are referred. They then get impaneled into a grand jury. The grand jury then takes a look, and the grand jury begins to decide, based upon the evidence presented to them in the grand jury in secrecy, whether or not there is something there sufficient to enact. In this case, the names that Tulsi Gabbard referred, I believe, were John Brennan and James Comey. If there's anybody else, I'm not aware, although we do know that some of the names on these memos that were so incredibly damning, these memos had names like Andrew McCabe from the FBI. You had DNI Clapper. You had CIA Brennan. You had FBI James Comey. You had also FBI Andrew McCabe, like I said. You had Susan Rice, National Security Advisor. If they were complicit in some way in forming a hoax with the intent of undermining the government, by the way, that's the other piece. The question is, were they acting on something they believed in good faith that they had to check out and they had reason to believe? Or were they literally saying, let's change the intel and go after him so that we can undermine the presidency? That's what's being presented to the grand jury. All right, more on this and your text messages. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. Establishing our freedoms of speech and assembly and religion and the right to bear arms are what protects us from losing all the other amendments. And I would dare say the Second Amendment is actually what protects the first. It's guns. I'm telling you, they're not that scary. It's people that are scary. So this is a turbulent time. How long after the fall of Saigon did you remain in the country? You personally remain in the country?
4 years.
So 4 years,
And
from
I think
1979-ish.
1979's 2 weeks after my birthday, which is in May, it's when my sister and I escaped Vietnam.
Okay, well, tell me about that, because I know in one of the speeches of yours that I reviewed, it wasn't your whole family that came out.
Right.
It was just a few, and your parents had to make a choice, basically.
Yes.
So what was that family discussion like to decide who leaves and who stays?
Gosh, I remember that night very clearly. I had several aunts and uncles. They were able to afford to pay passages. And when I say pay passages to leave Vietnam, meant that you're paying the official to look this way so you can escape
So
this
this is
way.
a bribe.
It's a bribe. So if you get caught, they can throw you in jail. So basically, you bribe the government to leave. So I had a few aunts and uncles that had signed up to leave Vietnam on this riverboat, and they're going to Australia because they felt Australia is the safest place to be. And also, we have a few cousins that already left Vietnam before the fall of Saigon, and they settled in Australia.
Okay.
So overnight, one of my aunt came home and told my dad that there may be some empty spots on this refugee boat, and that we should take the empty spots. And there's 8 of us in the family, my parents and 6 kids, me being the oldest.
Okay. How old were you at the time?
I was 12.
Wow.
Hmm.
Okay.
And basically, my parents have only a few hours to decide this. And my parents, of course, at this time in 1979, everybody was struggling. We don't have a whole lot of money. And I know it was a lot of sacrifice for my parents to even, bribe someone to the official for me and my sister to leave. And so, there were only enough money for just 2 passages. And so they picked me, being the oldest. I was 12. And my next sister, she's a little bit over 10 years old, to leave with my aunt and uncle. And my parent has to make the decision overnight. I mean, I just can't imagine.
No.
The pain and the...
Do you remember them telling you?
I remember, yeah. And I remember my parents said to trust them, and I think, being the oldest of 6, I'm pretty bratty. It's kind of like bratty, and also kind of...
Were you headstrong?
Yeah. I mean, I can fight any boys in my neighborhood growing up. I mean, I would have like a spitting contest with the boys. And anyway, so I just felt like, at that time, I felt like I'm trusting my parents. And even though now looking back, I can't even imagine them having to make this decision. No. Because, honestly, they don't know if they will ever see me and my sister again. They don't know that, right? But they have to make this hard decision because they knew that at least 2 of their kids may have a better life elsewhere than Vietnam.
Well, I mean, that's huge. And I've raised kids, and I understand you've raised your kids. And I cannot imagine at 10 and 12 years old sending them away and knowing never see them again.
I remember saying...
What an amazing thing.
Saying goodbye to my little brother. He was 2 years old. And that night, we slept in
And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. Just covering down on some major ground across the southeast U.S. of A. Y'all, I'm talking about this show. This one, I mean to say, this show goes from like Huntsville back over to Chattanooga. I'm talking about from Tuscaloosa back over to Gadsden. I mean, all the way down to that loveliest little village on the plains we call Auburn, straight across the line from there to what we call, once again, Fort Benning. And then big old patches. North Georgia, Mississippi, all thrown in just for good measure. And that's just the radio audience. That's just all y'all listen to radio. Then there's all y'all in the whole wide world going to the World Wide Web and like dialing in and watching live stream on air from X and Rumble and YouTube and Facebook. And, oh, by the way, our website, rightsidemedia.org. And then there's those of y'all that podcast after the fact. Anyway, the bottom line is this. I say all those things to say, we know where you are. We love the fact that you're there. The fact that this audience picks it up in a variety of different ways. Listen, all of y'all mean the world to us. You're the only reason why we do what we do. Thank you very much. I'm going to stay on this thing real quickly. So the grand jury proceedings are kicking off. This is the next layer right now. Now, I can't tell you what a grand jury is going to do. I can't tell you which way it's going to go. It's so Attorney General Pam Bondi has now apparently taken the referral from Tulsi Gabbard and directed her staff to then initiate a grand jury, to convene a grand jury and to create the investigation. By the way, the grand jury has two pieces, all right? It's got an investigative capacity, like a grand jury can actually subpoena documents, can require witnesses to come in and testify under oath, force them to actually testify. Under subpoena, you have to be there. A grand jury subpoena is not to be ignored. And even when grand jury subpoenas are issued, though, it doesn't mean that criminal charges are going to be brought. It just means you are required to come and testify. And you can bring counsel. You can have advice of counsel as you go in, but you've got to appear, and you may be a witness only, but then they have charging capacity. And a grand jury's charging capacity means that it can actually make the determination about whether there's enough evidence there to constitute an actual probable cause that a crime has been committed, and then charge that person. And then the indictment comes down. And then they have to go through the whole process of going to trial or making a plea deal or whatever the case may be. So names that we hear right now are Comey and James Comey and John Brennan. Those two names have been bandied about. JP just did some searching online right before we got back on the air. Found a soundbite. I'd forgotten about this press conference. Is this one she did with Tulsi Gabbard and Caroline Leavitt at the White House?
Yeah, this was the initial press conference with Tulsi and Caroline to announce that they were, what they found.
Okay, and she actually mentions Obama in it.
Yeah.
How long is this clip? About 30 seconds?
Yeah.
All right. Here's a clip. Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, talking about the fact that there was a referral made that might include some big names. Play it.
Believe that any of this new information implicates former President Obama in criminal behavior?
We have referred and will continue to refer all of these documents to the Department of Justice and the FBI to investigate the criminal implications of this.
For even former President Obama?
Correct. The evidence that we have found and that we have released directly point to President Obama leading the manufacturing of this intelligence assessment. There are multiple pieces of evidence and intelligence that confirm that fact.
Okay, that's pretty clear. She even said correct, which she said even Obama correct. I mean, so what we're hearing there is the whole cabal. And keep in mind, this is dating back. This is all breaking news. All right, so this is not one of my dippers for the day. I'm chasing a rabbit, so I'm gonna have to go as much from memory like y'all do on the story. But the bottom line is this. We now know because of documents that Tulsi Gabbard's people uncovered. We're talking about pulling them out of file cabinets, downloading them off of thumb drives, getting them off of computers, finding them in back rooms, who knows? But the end result is once it's done and it's documented, it becomes a thing, man, and there's going to be a record somewhere. And so Tulsi Gabbard's people, as a director of national intelligence, uncovered evidence that all of the intel reports and analyses leading up to the time of the election in 2016, were clearly saying, we don't see collusion, we don't see collusion, we don't see collusion. Russia would love to meddle, but we don't see any collusion. And then on December, I think it was 19th, either 9th or 19th of 2016, you have a meeting at the White House. Obama called in his national security team. That would be Susan Rice, that'd be John Brennan, that'd be James Clapper, that'd be James Comey, that'd be John Brennan, that'd be Andrew McCabe, and I think I said Susan Rice already, but then and I think even oh gosh, I can see his face. I can't say his name right now. It doesn't matter. I'm going off the cuff. But that cabal got together, and all of a sudden they walked out the door with new marching orders. Memos have now been uncovered since that meeting that, contrary to the memos that are in place before that meeting, say, per the president's directive, we will redirect the intelligence. In other words, we got to reconstruct the storyline. And all of a sudden, Russia collusion was birthed just like that. And we spent the next 4 years with the Mueller investigation, with having to go through millions and millions and millions of U.S. tax dollars being spent to investigate something that found nothing. We had any number of shouts from the liberal left media. We had our world turned upside down, and we truly wound up having the Trump administration, number one, the 1.0 Trump, being constantly impeded in its ability to move forward by this lie that he had somehow colluded with a foreign government in order to win the election. All of which appears to have been something that Hillary Clinton absolutely requested to have happen. Keep in mind, she had been Secretary of State. So that's where we are right now. What you got, dude?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you saw the story too last Wednesday about Kash Patel finding thousands of more documents in burn bags.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like, oh, so yeah, that's not suspicious at all.
No.
It's standard procedure to put documents in burn bags in the FBI,
Well, okay, I will say, yes, it is. Having worked in the Pentagon, having worked in a SCIF, burn bags are what you do. When you're through with the piece of paper, you can't just throw it away. Even shredding is bad. So you actually put them in burn bags, and they send people around whose job it is to come and collect the burn bag. You actually have to, they're actually marked bags, and they're marked with red exterior labels. And once you put the documents in there that are classified, you fold it down. They have to be stapled shut, have a date written on them, and then they're put in a certain place. And every day, a team comes around and actually there's furnaces at the Pentagon that all they do is burn bags. And
really?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of national security. So I don't fault them for having burn bags. The question is, why were these burn bags still in a room never burned?
Yeah, secretly.
They're like failure of protocol. But then the other piece is, how come we didn't know about these documents before?
Yeah, like he's discovering them.
Like, a grand jury may not be privy to, code word protected stuff. I get it. They may not be privileged to the SAP programs at the TS level. But if there's something that actually is exculpatory in nature, that actually proves that a storyline being foisted is actually not the reality, at some point you have to pull back. And if the FBI had these documents, the FBI was the one pushing for the Russia collusion story.
Yeah.
That's just jacked up. Okay. Burn bags. I'm having flashbacks to the Pentagon now. All right. We'll tell you more as we know more. Let me get some text messages. How much time we got? I got time. Tom with all the kids says some locations don't have certified incinerators and they require transportation of the burn bags to another location. Good point. Pentagon being where I was at the time has got everything. So you're right. I'm sure there are places. I don't know how y'all, Tom, if you want to chime in, you can again, but I don't know how y'all handle burn bags on Redstone. Is there a centralized facility where they come pick them up and transport them like they would in a armored car or something? I don't know. But then we got, is this, oh yeah, somebody else is texting in who calls himself Dirty Old Man from Madison. Okay. Dirty Old Man from Madison. Welcome to the text lines. He said the grand jury is convened in DC. There's going to be a no bill. That's my thought. I agree. Because the impaneled members of a grand jury come from the jurisdiction. So if you're impaneled on a grand jury, you reflect typically the jurisdictional, population. I will say this, Janine Pirro was just confirmed. She is the U.S. attorney now for D.C., but she can't do everything herself. It's going to be interesting to watch how this plays out. I would suspect that it's not going to be in D.C., but it depends. Tom with all the kids again says, I could tell you, but then I have to kill you. Well, Tom, good Lord. Mike from Muscle Shoals. Hey, Phil, is there any info when they're going to convene the grand jury? My understanding is the directive has been given to impanel the grand jury now. I don't know, I'm not privy to timelines. They haven't even announced who the prosecutor is, and they may not, but we'll work it out. Paul from Athens says, I love unnamed prosecutor, no media circus, no threats or manipulating the prosecutor or the family yet. Yeah, that's the whole point, dude. This is going to be, we're talking about some big names, big names with lots of fingers. And if Hillary Clinton's involved, good Lord. Every prosecutor who has to touch this thing needs to leave a note saying, I'm not suicidal, if you know what I mean. John M. from Huntsville. John M. from Huntsville is talking about, where are we? He's talking about the public broadcasting in rural stations, saying they chose to live in their rural areas. That is true. You're correct. Jay from Killen, Alabama, says, several minutes have passed since your monologue. I was driving. I couldn't touch my phone. I think Lincoln said, heavily paraphrased, that strict enforcement was key to the repeal of bad laws. You know, that's a good point. If you strictly enforce it, it'll wear out its welcome real quick. We'll see what they do. John from Lexington, South Carolina says, may they end up like General Flynn. Let the process be the pun. Wow. Shag Nasty, the atheist checking in, though, calls it a kangaroo court. Because, of course, it is when conservatives, it ain't no fun when the rabbit's got the gun, is it, Shag? But the reality is I trust this group at DOJ far more than I trusted the last one. Just saying. Kenan from Huntsville, dating back to our earlier conversations about the Huntsville City Ordinance that says you can't even touch a phone while you're driving, says, do Huntsville Police Department officers use the large computer screen and keyboard mounted on their dash while driving? I suspect they do. In fact, I'm sure they do. Jeff from Indiana says, Phil, public broadcasting would still be being funded by the government if they were a neutral entity. But instead, all they did was broadcast communist manifestos and nothing right wing. They had been basically warned for years that they were too stupid to think the funding would actually dry up. Yup. Thomas from Athens says, by the way, your article in 1819 News entitled A Common Sense Revolution was right on. I suggest good reading for other ruffians. Thomas, thank you. You can find it, by the way, we posted it on a rightsidemedia.org website. There's a place on there where it says read on rightsidemedia.org, and all the stuff's on there, and the Common Sense Revolution is now up. And thank you very much for that. That was the latest piece getting published around the region already. 1819 News always gets first stab at it because of our friendship and partnership there. But Common Sense Revolution is absolutely a part of what we're in right now. Last one before I go to the break. Tim Swine from Berkeley, Alabama. I don't know what that means. He says HPD and law enforcement has exceptions in the law for computers. Oh, did they really? No kidding.
Okay, so I can have my Mac sitting on my console and texting people and all that, and that's fine?
No, actually, they can.
Oh, I see.
Not you.
I see.
Yes, indeed. Apparently, they're trained how to be distracted.
Yeah.
And then Shag Nasty, the atheist, again checking in, saying a popular saying online now is that Sherman didn't destroy enough of the South, and I now agree. Wow, Shag, you are absolutely 100% way in your element as we speak. I'd love to know where you're texting from, but you're not bold enough to tell us. All right. Tell you what, we're taking a break. Phil Williams, Right Side Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back.
A mosquito enclosement. That's how we sleep in Vietnam.
Under
I remember
a net?
a net. Yeah, mosquito net. I remember hugging my brother and one of my sisters, two of the other sisters. It was summer, so there was no school. So two of the sisters did visit some of our relatives elsewhere. I remember thinking, this is maybe the last time I get to see two of my siblings and my parents. And I just, that morning when my dad took my sister and I to the coast to leave on this riverboat, looking back and seeing my mom there, not sure if I ever see her again. That was hard.
Oh, well, I can't even imagine. I also can't imagine not just your side, but I can't even imagine the parent side of it. But so you got on the boat though, and you're on there, and you do have some family ties on the boat with you. You have an aunt, uncle, and some cousins.
Yes.
How many total?
There was 2 sets of aunts and uncles and 2 of their kids.
Okay. And then how many people total on the boat? I mean, is this
It's about 400.
Oh, this is not a small boat.
No, well, no, it's a small boat, but they fit as many people in there as they can, and there was not room. There was only room just to sit. There's not even room to lay down. And I remember one time my sister and I had our backs together just to sleep because there's no room to lay down.
All right, I heard you speak. This was not a smooth voyage. This boat, and you were actually at some point intercepted by pirates. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, how'd that go?
Well, not very well. But, well, first of all, the South China Sea was full of pirates at that time. And because they knew that the Vietnamese refugees carry gold and jewelries with them to start their lives elsewhere, right?
Right.
So piracy is, I think it was estimated that a quarter of the refugee boat people was robbed by pirates.
Wow.
And they're from Thailand and other, Malaysia, Indonesia, and all that. But yeah, we were, after several days at sea, we actually landed in Malaysia.
So you went ashore in Malaysia, or is this before the pirates or after?
This is okay. So this part may be a little bit sensitive, in a way, but this is the truth. We landed in Malaysia, and we thought we were going to be rescued. Well, the Malaysian Navy came out, and they tied our boat to their boat, and they pulled us out to the sea.
Oh, wow. And
we thought we were getting pulled to somewhere like a refugee camp or something. They pulled us out to sea where there's no people that can see them. They robbed us.
The Malaysian Navy?
Yes, because they were in uniform.
Wow. Wow. Did you have any personal items of your own stolen? Were there any people that were taken? I mean,
yeah. Well,
I would imagine human trafficking is also an issue sometimes in this.
That would have happened, I believe, with all my heart. But if it wasn't for the grace of God, God intervened during this situation because a huge storm was brewing. So they started robbing people, and they found a bunch. They came over with metal detector.
Yeah.
And the captain of our boat has hidden some gold on the boat, and they found the gold, and it was a lot of gold. And so they were busy doing that. And then they make people strip off their jewelry. And I remember my mom had sent some jewelry with us, some gold bracelets and necklaces and stuff. And my sister and I actually strip them off of us, and we would stuff them in our mouths just to hide from the pirates. So that was saved. But they found a lot of gold from the captain that they didn't want to bother with the people too much. And even while they were robbing us, there was this huge storm brewing really fast, and they wanted to get out of there. So
sometimes God calms a storm, and sometimes He brings a storm.
Exactly.
And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid conservative, just plain right. Just pulling pins on truth grenades in here, giving you all the truth you can slap on a bumper sticker. So I'm going into the Dipper number 2 for the day, redistricting inside the lines. In other words, I'm giving you the inside scoop on what's happening right now. There's a huge story right now out of Texas. Now, listen, I've been a part of some redistricting fights when I was in the state Senate. And Democrats can't stand it when they're not the ones in charge. They will scream and cry and carry on. I watched everything happen in Montgomery. I watched, every attempt at filibustering. I even saw, and this was so egregious, it was unbelievable. There was one individual who was probably going to get a Democrat get drawn out of his own district. And he was so mad that he went up there. He tried to filibuster for a while, and then he finally just asked for the bill to be read at length. Well, the bill being read at length is an old, archaic tactic that dates back to the days when you didn't have copy machines and people could claim, I've not had a chance to actually read the bill, because back then they didn't. And so you can ask for it to be read at length. Well, that rule still applies. It's still on the books. And the left especially loves to use it to slow down the processes. It delays the inevitable, in other words. In other words, you call for the vote, and before the vote, you can say to the president, I request the bill be read at length. and they pretty much have no choice but to do it. So-and-so requests the bill to be read at length. The clerk will begin to read the bill. Reading that bill on the redistricting fight that we were in 2011 was a day and a half in length, I believe. That's unbelievable. It was taking a day, somewhere around 9 hours into it. The guy agreed to go ahead and remove his request, and so it was shut off. It doesn't mean we didn't lose 9 hours though of legislative time. It's an archaic tactic. But then there is what's going on in Texas. So Texas right now is in the midst of a redistricting. I'll tell about how that's going in a minute. But the Democrats' means of handling it is to flee the Capitol. I kid you not. It reminds me of the scene from Monty Python and the Holy Grail when the killer rabbit comes out of the cave. Run away, and they literally turn and just run away. That's their and they're so proud of themselves. They're bold. They're taking a strong stand against Texas and Trump. Like, okay, Trump's not there drawing the lines. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, here's the other thing. Redistricting does not happen overnight. It doesn't. Redistricting is a big, long, drawn-out process. There are people who are paid experts who have to come in and draw the maps. And here's the other thing. State constitution requires they be drawn based upon population. In other words, you can't draw everybody into one district and leave somebody with a district that has 10 people in it. It doesn't work like that. They all have to be roughly the same size in terms of population within about a 2 to 3 or 4% margin of error. I mean, there's going to be onesies and twosies. You're not going to have an exact same number in every one. And you also try to keep certain, communities together. That's why in the last redistricting in Alabama, we drew I wasn't part of that one, but Alabama drew what it thought was a fair and reasonable set of congressional districts in that case. And it kept whole communities together. And the court got involved for reasons I'll talk about in a minute. The court got involved and said, no, Alabama, we don't like your drawings. Do them again. And Alabama said, nope, we're not going to do it again. We're done. So the court drew one for us. Now, it's being challenged. It's still underway right now. But the congressional district lines were redrawn by the court. And what did they do? They drew one that was decidedly Democrat, and they split Mobile in half. Really, really angered the citizens of Mobile. And I understand that. Now, some might say, well, that means Mobile's got 2 congresspeople. They didn't want 2. They wanted 1 like they'd always had. So Mobile is now split in half. You can be literally across the street from somebody voting different than you in the congressional races. But redistricting is a huge deal, and it gets all kinds of attention. But what's happening in Texas right now is like a clown show. I'll tell you more about it when we get back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back.
And so the storm was brewing really fast, and they were trying to rob us really fast, so they didn't search everybody.
So you got to keep yours.
So my family got to keep ours.
Wow.
Jewelry. But that storm got them out of there. And their plan was they disabled our engine and threw some of our provision overboard. So they think that someone's going to capsize our little boat. They disabled
the engine, left the boat just adrift?
Yes.
Okay.
So they were hoping that storm would capsize our boat and kill all of us. So they don't have to do the killing themselves. We believe that is their plan. But that storm, if they didn't capsize a boat, that they were hoping we would be floating in the South China Sea, starved to death because they disabled our engine. We couldn't go anywhere.
How long did you stay adrift after that?
Several days.
Wow.
Several days adrift. And that storm actually carried us to Indonesia, closer to Indonesia.
Which is where you wound up.
Yes.
In a refugee camp, am I right?
Yes. So the Indonesians saw a boat and they came out and they helped us.
That's an amazing circumstance.
Yeah, exactly. God just intervened.
How about that?
I believe that with all my heart.
Well, I believe it with you. Philosophical right off the bat. So having said all that, those things, like on paper, I see it all. But how do you want to be remembered?
Yeah, no, I mean, the only thing that you should be remembered as is who are you in the person of Jesus Christ, because that's the only thing that lasts, right? Now, if I die right now, I'm going to be attached. I'm going to have a lasting impact, even in my death, on my wife and my girls. Possibly some of the people in my sphere of influence, possibly some of the guys in the SEAL teams I work with or in business or whatever. I might have a lasting impact. But oftentimes that lasting impact is not so much, it's not so much who you are here physically. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I really believe it's who you are in the person of Jesus Christ. Because they look at it and say, man, that guy really was who he believed in. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so it's, and I believe it's in James, he talks about, I'll show you my faith through my works. That's not a works-based salvation. Right. He's not saying that I'm working my way to heaven. I'm not doing X, Y, and Z, and that's going to get me to heaven. No, he's just saying, I have faith and I believe in Jesus, and because of that, you're going to see my fruits. My fruits are going to show that I believe in Jesus. Now, there's another aspect of that without getting too far off on this topic. You hear a lot of people say, oh, I let people see who Jesus is through how I live my life, right? That's what, I don't necessarily tell everybody about Jesus, but they get to see who Jesus is through how I live my life. Well, that's not good either, because Paul says, how will they hear if they don't have a preacher to preach? So there's two aspects to that. There's one, what I say, right? Scripture says a freshwater spring doesn't produce salt water. What I say is unbelievably important. But then once I say it, it's my actions that back it up. It's words, then action. And we see that with God. John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word, right? Wasn't in the beginning was the action, was the creation. No, in the beginning was the Word was God, the Word was with God. And then all was made through him and by him, and without him, nothing was made. We see that in John chapter 1. First was the Word, what he spoke, what we speak. Then second is the actions that back up what we speak. And ultimately see in John chapter 4 or John chapter 1 verse 14, the Word became flesh and dwelt among men, right? And we see that in Isaiah. He says, I was amazed. God was amazed that there was none who could stand before him. He's talking about when he was drawing the plan to create the world. None could intercede for man, so he said, I'll take up my own strong arm of salvation. So God says, I'm going to make a world where sin is possible. I'm not going to make them sin, but I'm going to give them the option. And guess what? I know they're going to choose sin. And there's none that are going to be able to stand before him, but I'm going to make a way out of sin, and it's going to be through me. That's what God says, and that's who we should be.
That's
so
1
the lasting
10:13.
That's right. So that's a lasting impact. The lasting impact is when I die, when I'm gone, when anybody looks, was Jared Hudson, was his actions, how he raised his kids, the husband he was to his wife, how he was to his friends, the guys he went to war with, the guys that he worked with here, stateside law enforcement. Did his actions match the words that he said? And those are the two important things. So when I'm remembered, I want to be remembered as a guy whose actions matched my words, because ultimately that should, as a Christian, that should give not honor and glory to me, that gives honor and glory to God. That guy really was who he believed in.
I think that's awesome. And let me ask you this, because I'm going to chase a rabbit for a minute. I just heard probably 5 times in the last couple of minutes you quoting scripture. So, like me
loosely quoting scripture.
Okay, it wasn't too awful of a paraphrase, but most of it was pretty accurate. Yeah. And also when you said that, it would click verses in my mind. I think I responded back a minute ago, 1 Corinthians 10:13. Yeah. So I'm a firm believer in memorizing scripture. My personal, I call it my life verse, is Joshua 1:8 and 9. And it says, this book of the law shall not depart from you. You shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may do what is written in it, and by this achieve prosperity and success. So let me ask you this. Is the memorization of scripture something that's happened just because it was ingrained over time, or do you have a deliberate attempt on a regular basis to put it to memory?
Man, I just read it, if I'm being honest.
It sticks?
Yeah, just read it. What'd you say?
Does it just stick? I mean, when you read it, does it stay?
Stick? Yeah,
or do you intentionally try to memorize it?
No, I don't intentionally try to memorize it. It's just I think it's just the natural outcome of reading the word. You can, and when I was a kid, we did Awanas. I think it was with my dad. Yes, we did Awanas. Not far from here. Rainbow City First Baptist, right up the road here. And so we would memorize verses as a kid that would stick. And having a dad that was a pastor, my parents, they never forced us to do anything, but we would read scripture, you know, and we'd read it as a family. And I think all my brothers and sisters do the same thing. We spend time in our Bible. It's a part of our life because it was ingrained into us at a young age.
Yeah.
Proverbs says, train up a child in the way they'll go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. And so I think there's an aspect of that to whoever I see it with my daughters, with my girls. We'll do memory verses, and we'll read stories, and we'll do Bible stories at night before they go to bed. So I do believe that's important. However, my parents' faith is not my faith. My parents' faith is not what's going to get me into heaven.
Perfect.
My dad's faith wasn't my mom's faith. My mom's faith wasn't her kid's faith. So we have our own faith in the person of Jesus Christ. So I do believe that you can't always lean on your mom and dad if they were Christians or if they were not Christians. You're going to answer for what you do. And
yeah, like the dude just said, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, welcome to hour number 3 on a Meatloaf Monday. Man, that sounds good right about now, too, to be honest with you. Meatloaf Monday. Here we are. So I'm in Dipper number 2, and we'll see how far we can get with this, but redistricting inside the lines. And I mentioned before that redistricting, let me recap what that is first in order to lay the stage. I know most of you already know, but for those who don't, I'm just going to say it real quick. Redistricting, whether it be your state legislative races, whether it be judicial races, whether it be congressional races, every state has to have them broken up into districts. And they have to have those, whether it be House or Senate, they have to, in the state level, they have to have congressional races. They have to have basically the lay of the land. You have to know who to vote for. And it's all based upon population. Every state is allocated certain members of Congress. We are allowed to have 7 in Alabama. That's based on population. But then the 7 are then broken down. And then the same is going for the state legislative races, House and Senate. You have to have them broken down by population. House is smaller. There's more members of the House. In Alabama, there's 105 members of the state House, and there's 35 members of the state Senate. Every Senate district does not look the same geographically. I used to chide my friend, Bill Holtzclaw, who was a state senator from Madison. It'd take him 10 minutes to drive across his district. You know why? Because the population in Madison was so condensed. So he got his population base from a smaller geographic area. Me, it'd take me 45 minutes sometimes to drive across the district. I would literally have to drive to Timbuktu to see the people up in Broomtown in Cherokee County. Very rural in some parts of my former state Senate district. So all that to say, it's based on population. When you draw those lines, there are experts that come in and they help you, and it's based upon the census. Everything's allowed to be done based upon the 10-year census. So the first time we did it was in 2011, based upon the 2010 census. You remember, we thought Alabama was going to lose some seats, and then lo and behold, we grew, whereas California and New York lost seats in Congress because they lost population base. Alabama stayed in a good position, and we kept all 7 of our seats in Congress. Some states are huge, and they'll have, 20, 30, 40 members of Congress like California. Some states like Alabama have 7. You got others that have a couple. But the reality is it's drawn based upon population. And there are rules to that. And people like to talk about gerrymandering. Every time you draw the lines is not a gerrymander. Sometimes you draw the lines, and I will say this, when you draw the lines, you have to draw them by population. So don't try to tell me you don't have enough, because you know you do. The question is, do you like what you got? That's where the fuss comes in. The fuss is always about, well, you tried to make it more Republican, or you tried to make it more Democrat. Well, who's in charge? Elections have consequences. I'm sorry. For 136 straight years, the Democrats held control of the Alabama State House. Guess how they drew the lines? Well, you got behind closed doors in your smoky back rooms and you drew up your own districts. Did we? Did we really? Because it looks like, you know what? The state kind of turned red in its voting, and most of y'all got voted out anyway.
Are the back rooms actually smoky?
I've never seen a smoky back room.
Okay.
I've seen places where you look like they might have smoked back in the day.
Yeah. Okay.
But I was never in a smoky back room.
No, I just always hear that. And I think it's
I have been in a few back rooms.
I figured you have.
The back rooms do exist. You know what? That's where a lot of business gets done. That doesn't mean bad things. Sometimes it does. Doesn't always mean bad things. All right. That's redistricting. And you have to do it. And you have to do it. By law, you have to do it. The funny thing is, it's being done and then it's being screamed about because it wasn't a certain way. Let's talk about Alabama for a minute. Alabama had a major case. We redrew after the 2020 census, the state House and Senate district lines and the congressional lines. We were told all along that Alabama is a racist state. You're going to have pre-clearance. You're under the Voting Rights Act, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. We're going to make sure you don't draw those race-conscious lines to protect all your white voters. And then what happens? Well, then we don't use race. And then they tell us, you didn't put enough black people in those districts. What? After 2011, when we drew the lines, the screams were that we had stacked and packed, they called it. Stacking and packing black people into certain districts. Really? I know we didn't. That's where they live. What do you want us to do? That's where they live. If there's more black people in Greene County than there are in, say, Madison County, I can't help that. That's where they live. No, you stacked and packed them. That way they're diminished in quality. They cannot impact the broader whole. So now you want us to use race to spread them out? Really? And then what happened in 2020? Drew the lines. You didn't put enough black people in certain districts. Wait. What's the rule? What's the rule? Is the rule that we can, consider race, or can we not consider race? And it's the most asinine thing. Well, basically, you're danged if you do, danged if you don't, because Democrats are going to sue no matter what you do. So you go ahead and you just do it. So they drew the lines in 2020 in Alabama, and it went to court. And the 3-judge panel of the 11th Circuit decided that we didn't, I say we, I wasn't there, but you know what I mean, that Alabama didn't draw good lines. And so they had to go back and do it again. The interesting thing is, Alabama decided to go ahead and say, you know what? No, we drew what we drew. If you don't like it, then fine. Tell us what you want us to do, but it's not going to be redrawing the lines. I thought that was rather bold, to be honest with you. And it wasn't like a defying the orders of the court. It was more along the lines of saying, if we go back and draw again, we're just going to draw the same thing. So what do you want to do? So the court drew it for us. And we now have Shamari Figures as a member of Congress who never could have gotten elected in what used to be the district he's now in. We now have 2 Democrats where we used to have 1. Why is that? Because the court got involved and the court decided to make sure that it favored race and, oh, by the way, we really believe favored Democrats. I had John Wall on the show from the Alabama Republican Party who said, let's be honest, this was a district drawn to give Democrats more representation in state politics in Alabama. Wow. And as a result, it split Mobile in half and it drew lines that you look at and go, what, really? And that's what it took for the court to decide that it had something that, I don't know, met the new race standard we were told didn't exist. All right, where is that thing now? Well, Alabama eventually agreed to go ahead and accept these redistricting lines drawn by the court and to not challenge them again as a state until we get to the next census in 2030. Okay. Thought it was over? Sorry, it's not. We've got a situation right now where the Justice Department, U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, Prim Escalona, just filed something saying, hey, we don't need more pre-clearance because there's now another challenge because Democrats are never satisfied. They don't want to stick with what they got. They want to demand that not only do we stick with what the court drew, but that we have to, as a state, submit to what's known as pre-clearance once again. What does that mean? Pre-clearance is when you say, hey, state of Alabama, we just don't trust you. So you've got to send your lines to the federal government and we'll take 60 days to review them before you're allowed to implement them for a vote. And we'll tell you whether you're good people or bad people or not. It's really big government. It's really awful. It's really not necessary. We're really way beyond all that. But the plaintiffs in the case that sued about the lines in the first place have now brought another demand for pre-clearance, and arguments have been heard. Well, the U.S. Attorney's Office is saying that's not necessary. Could we please stop this? And asking the court filing a brief in the situation, asking the court to not give credence to the argument that we need preclearance. All right, you see what I'm saying? When I say all this, I'm about to dive into what's happening in Texas, but I think you need to know that we have active litigation going on right now, even in Alabama. We have active litigation going on pretty much all over the nation. The Democrats especially are never satisfied. By the way, they are the worst gerrymanderers in the world. Have you ever looked at Illinois? Have you ever looked at their districts? They make no sense. They draw long, thin fingers in order to reach through to get a few more Democrat voters and bring them into a district just to make it, I don't know, blue. They're scared to death of the idea that if they drew lines that looked like they made sense, listen, I've been in the room when they talked about where the lines were going to fall. I've also fussed. I have fussed about my own district. Why are you taking my St. Clair County people? If you're going to do that, then by God, quit splitting my Cherokee County people. And I've had those discussions before. I have. But in the end, you know what it comes down to? A plan gets published and a plan gets voted on by the legislature. And once the legislature has spoken, remember, elections have consequences. That means technically the representation of the people of the state have now spoken. And yet the Dems are never satisfied with that process. Alabama's going through it like right now, again. We'll see where it goes. In the meantime, Texas is quite the story. We'll get back from this break. I'll tell you more about it. Maybe even have a sound clip to talk to hear from what the actual state legislature just did. But yes, redistricting is like, a fight in Texas. Dems don't fight, they run. We'll talk about it more in a minute.
What does that mean? When I say what you do, how do I transact with the person of Jesus Christ? Faith is not a work. I can have faith in the person of Jesus Christ and accept what he's done for me on the cross, or I can do what Pilate does, wash my hands and believe the lie that I'm innocent of this man's blood. So there is an aspect of you that is involved. Does that make sense?
There is.
Now, me being involved for just who I am, and everybody's different. Some people might write it down. Some people might memorize it. I would go on deployments, and I would just write because I could memorize better writing. I'd start in Genesis you're on a 6-month deployment to Afghanistan. If we weren't opping, we're watching movies. I can quote movies and all that, and my wife drives her crazy. How do you know these movies? I'm like, we watch tons of movies on deployment. And I would write just word for word, just what I was reading in my Bible. My granddaddy told me, he said, hey, read a Proverbs a day and it will make you wise. And I gave him, before one deployment, I gave him a Bible I had when I was in high school. I think the only thing I ever read was Proverbs. I'd read Proverbs a day and I would annotate it. And I gave it to him and literally it was all marked up. And I said, I read a Proverbs a day. And he told me, he said, well, that's good, son, but I didn't mean only read Proverbs. You ought to read the rest of the Bible as well. So there's that aspect too. We pick the things that we like. And I've learned that over time. And now I do the Bible throughout the year in about 10 months. It takes me to go through the whole Bible.
Yeah. So let me ask you,
it sticks.
It does stick. Yeah. And obviously I would say you definitely had some intentionality attached to it too. But let me ask you this. Has there been a time, and I'm really chasing a rabbit right now, but has there been a time, because God's word never comes back void.
Yeah.
Has there been a time when you were in the thick of something and a verse came back to you that you hadn't even thought of for a while, and it just like, wow, I needed to ponder on that for a minute?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's one that I'd never thought of for a while. I'll use a training example. A lot of times I hate Bud's training examples because a lot of guys that just tell Bud stories is because they have no war stories. That's what I've learned. They've never killed anybody or actually been in combat. The training stories I'm not big on, but this is one where this would apply, I guess. There was a Master Chief, and I believe his name was Guild, Master Chief Guild. If I remember right, I'm probably getting it wrong. I could text somebody and see. But either way, he was doing a program. He was part of a program where he would mentor Bud students as they were going through. They were trying to get numbers up because training is pretty much the same across the board. Standard the same. The percentage was the same. They increased Bud's classes. We had 366 start with ours in class 264, and 32 actually graduated SQT and got a trident, right? So, you're looking at less than 10% by the time you get selected to go to a SEAL team. And then once you get there, now you've got, sniper school. I mean, we lost 60%, 40% of us graduated and became snipers. And these are all SEALs, right? So we lost 60% in sniper school that had to go back to a team and didn't get sniper quad. You lose, like Green Team, selection for development group, what everybody refers to as SEAL Team 6, Special Mission Unit. Those are all SEALs. A lot of them good dudes, but you'll also lose 60% of those, and 40% of those guys will become Special Mission Unit SEALs. So there's always a selection process where there's an attrition rate. Make sense? And they're trying.
Well, there should be.
As it should be.
If it was easy, everybody do it, right?
Exactly right. But what they're doing is they're trying to increase those numbers because we need more SEALs, we need more snipers, we need more guys screening for Special Mission Unit. Right. Because of the way the war was going at the time. This is 2006, and he was going through buds with us, and he would meet with students, and he would say, "Hey guys, look, this is what people do." He would go to the NFL, go all over the place, and figure out what mindset things, and all kinds of them. He'd bring it back and try to present it. And he said, every warrior across, the all of history, all of the planet, all of history, had a mantra. They had something they held to, something they leaned on, whether it was their belief system in a God, whether it was their family, whether it was whatever it is as a mantra. And I'm some dumb redneck kid from Alabama, 19 years old. I didn't know what a mantra was. And he said, what's that one thing that you can hold to that will help you make it through this process? Because if you can hold to something else besides the pain that you're going through, the distress of hypothermia, cold water, getting beat and buzz, all that stuff. If you can hold to something else, you can make it through. But if you concentrate on what you're going through, you'll never make it. Right? That was kind of his. And I'm not saying I necessarily agree with all that, but that's what he was putting out. And so I prayed to God. I mean, I knew the one thing I held to was God as a Christian. Grew up as a Christian, right? Got saved when I was 6 years old. Asked Jesus into my heart. Like, God, what could my mantra be? I think it has to be in you. I'm here for my family, for me. I want to do this, but it's in you. What is it?
And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid conservative, just plain right. Just saving the world, one soundbite at a time. Got a piece here off of LifeSet, Dateline today. Supreme Court signals an interest in a major voting rights case that could reshape House control. What does this mean? Redistricting again. So redistricting, there's a case called Louisiana v. Calais. So the outcome of this case is said to be able to carry nationwide implications, including the possibility that, you could see the redrawing of dozens of House districts around the nation, shifting the whole political landscape. Here's the deal. At the center of that whole case, and this is interesting that we're watching right now, is the Supreme Court has not taken it up officially, but they did ask the Solicitor General to kind of weigh in on it and give them thoughts, which means that they've expressed interest. At the center of the case is whether that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act permits a race-conscious creation of congressional districts. In other words, what Alabama was just told we had to do. See, here's the thing. The case that I'm talking about that Alabama dealt with is called Allen v. Milligan. And in Allen v. Milligan, the Supreme Court weighed in, but they left a piece undone. And they do that a lot. They get to where they don't want to decide everything. So they, unless you ask specifically, or they might take up an issue and say that finding that issue now precludes any need to deal with the other issues. The end result is, in the case for Alabama, Allen v. Milligan, the justices preserved the current interpretation of Section 2, but they left open the question of how far race-based considerations can actually go. And that's a big deal. They left this nebulous piece there where they kind of questioned it, but they declined to respond at that point or answer at that point. Their opinion stopped short. Now what we're looking at, though, is Louisiana v. Calais takes that exact issue, and they're expressing interest in taking up Louisiana v. Calais. We'll find out soon, but here's the thing. If the court winds up doing a broad ruling on this thing and decides that you just can't, you know what, you got to stop using race. You can't say one way or the other. You can't say race this, race not that. You can't. If they go down that road, there are some political analysts that are saying that the ripple effect would result in Republicans gaining as many as 20 to 25 seats in the House, depending upon how states respond to it. I can tell you right now, Alabama will respond. We'll start redrawing lines. Now, what's happening in Texas? Texas is like a goat rodeo right now, man. Texas has turned into a clown show. It is a circus. So one thing I will say, Alabama Daily News, we had Todd Stacy on earlier. I saw an article on his site. One thing I did not know was, I will say this, Texas Republicans have gone down a road that people didn't expect. Redistricting, they do that, right? Yeah, every 10 years. They decided to do an extra one. What? Yes. They're calling it a mid-cycle redistricting. Pray tell, how does this work? How can you do that? Well, because the law says they shall redraw every 10 years, but it doesn't say they're confined just to 10 years. And the interpretation now by the Texas Republicans is they can do it every year if they want to. Well, now, so in this whole reapportionment process or redistricting, state constitutions, set the things in motion. So state constitutions will govern. Texas Constitution says you have to redistrict after every census, but it doesn't say you can't do it more. So what Texas has done is stepped into the role of being the foil. They are the ones saying, hey, you know what? I think we're going to do that now. Because we can. And the Democrats are freaking out. Democrats are having a complete come apart because they didn't think of it when they had the chance. But Democrats are like, you can't do this. Yes, actually, they can. And they are. And they've drawn it. So what the Democrats do? They fled. You have to have a quorum to vote. So in order to prevent the vote on the, by the way, this is not new. They've been drawing these lines for a while. I started to say earlier, I've been in the rooms where they're drawing. It takes months, literally months, to draw these things up. You can't do them overnight. There's going to be hearings. There's going to be experts involved. There's going to be mapping. There's going to be, any number of census scrutiny. There's going to be all kinds of things have to happen. And Democrats are just now going, but you can't do that. Well, we are, and we have been for months. Where you been? And they have now fled the state, not just the Capitol. They have fled the state in order to avoid allowing a quorum to be called for the vote. It's unbelievable. They are so in the minority in Texas. It's like Alabama in many ways. They are out of 150 members of the House, only a third of those are Democrats. And they have now fled to various states. Most of them went to Illinois, which, by the way, the deep irony there is that Illinois Democrats are the gerrymander kings. They've been like drawing crazy lines in Illinois for God knows how long. Probably mafia run half the time. So you got the Democrats fleeing to Governor Pritzker's, take care of us, Governor Pritzker. We need, and then they're going online on their social medias. You can see them. It's all like, we're taking a stand. No, you're not. You ran away. If you want to take a stand, go back and do what you were elected to do. You weren't elected to run away when a vote you didn't like came up. What happens next time when there's a budget bill you don't like? What happens when there's a tax raise you don't like? What happens when, do you just run away when you don't like it? Is that the way this works? My God, what soldier gets that kind of mission in life? You don't like it? Run away. Democrats in Texas, it's a clown show, man. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it when we get back. Like, I don't know, are they going to go to jail? Governor Abbott just weighed in. I'll tell you about it. Y'all stay tuned.
No, 2 Corinthians 12:9, I believe, is the verse that says, it's when Paul was asking God, he's saying, hey, take away these thorns in my flesh, right? Whatever the issue was. People, some theologians say, believe it was a sight. Some people believe it was other things. But he said, take away these thorns in my flesh. He asked 3 times, and God 3 times said no. And then God says to Paul, he says, my strength, this is 2 Corinthians 12:9, my strength is sufficient for you, or my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in your weakness. And I thought, that's it. And so that is a scripture that the Lord gave me in that time that I really didn't even, I'm sure I'd read it before, but I was a young kid. It's not like it was just brought up to my mind. I remember specifically reading that as I'm praying, reading that in a Bible, in my study Bible, and being in 2 Corinthians, and that scripture stuck out at me. And so that's what all right, God, your grace is sufficient for me. Your strength will be made perfect in my weakness. And that's in that book. Buds wasn't that hard as far as a physical standard. Like you could pass, I could probably even now at 40 years old pass most of the standards. I can still do the O course. I could probably do first and maybe second phase 4 mile time run times. I could probably still do the swim. It's not actually that hard. It's the continuation of it through injury, through constant work that makes it so hard. They make you bad at things that you are often good at. That's why so many athletes struggle with it. So anyway, that's probably the best example I can give of a scripture that
that's
I
a
held
good one.
to.
And I had when I was my first tour downrange when I was mobbing out of Bragg. We had some SEER instructors that spent time with us, and I'll never forget. And I've actually talked about this before. I don't even remember what all they told me. I don't remember how to do my search and rescue dot, but I probably could now. But the reality is, one thing that stuck out with me was he said at one point he like just stopped in the middle of it, like it was an unplanned moment, and he goes, "Hey, let me just say, if you don't already have something bigger than yourself that you believe in, you better get it right now before you go downrange, because if they ever take you, you better have something to hang on to that's more than you."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And for me, that was my faith.
Yeah.
And for me, that was mine in downrange was Psalm 91, the soldier psalm they call it.
That was my wife's on my first deployment.
And my wife's the one who gave it to me.
No,
I don't
okay.
think I even knew Psalm 91 until she gave it to me.
No, I didn't. My wife can quote it word for word still.
Absolutely.
We were married. How old was she? I think I was 21. I might have been 22, and she was 19 when we got married. And and 2 months later, I rolled to Afghanistan, and it was a great deployment. Man, it was the Wild West. We're killing everybody we came in contact with. Those bad guys. It was what you trained for. It's what you desired. It's what you were going to do. It was great. Now hindsight being 2020, it's like, should we have even really been there? Now knowing what we've done, or at least seeing how they pulled out of Afghanistan. And but at the time, man, it's what you wanted to do as a young SEAL. And my wife, though, she knew that. She knew that what we're going into, what we were doing, and she prayed Psalm 91 every day. That was her verse.
Charlene did the same. My wife did the exact same thing. There's Operation Gothic Serpent, which is heading into Somalia. Became known as the Battle of Mogadishu. A lot of your book, of course, and rightfully so, is focused on that mission. I want to dive into that for a bit because that's the one. Your situation in the Battle of Mogadishu took you out of running in obscurity in terms of your personal name and thrust you into the eyes of the entire world. And I remember that. I remember when that happened. It was amazing to see it. But for those who don't recall, Operation Gothic Serpent, the intro into Mogadishu for the United States actually started under George H.W. Bush.
Correct.
But it transitioned in early '93 when Clinton took office.
Correct.
So you were there during Clinton's era, correct?
Yes.
All right. So Clinton took office in January '93. Task Force Ranger is the name of the U.S. presence, I guess, at the airfield there. And then in October, was it October 3rd, I think? October 3rd, '93, launched what many people just refer to as Black Hawk Down because that's the book and the movie.
Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right.
And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. Just covering down on some major ground across the southeast U.S. of A. Y'all, I'm talking about this show. This one, goes from like Huntsville back over to Chattanooga. I'm talking about Tuscaloosa back over to Gadsden. All the way down to that loveliest little village on the plains we call Auburn. Straight across the line from there to what we now call, once again, Fort Benning, and then big old patches of North Georgia and Mississippi, all thrown in just for good measure. And that's just the radio. And then, oh, by the way, there's all of y'all out there in the whole wide world going to the World Wide Web and streaming the show live every day, streaming it from all over the place. I'm talking about like foreign countries even, streaming the show on places like X, YouTube, our rightsidemedia.org website, Facebook, all of it. And then the podcasters who catch it after the fact, we know you're there too. I'm saying all this to say we love this audience. We know you're out there in whatever way you get the show. Thank you. It means the world to us. Thank you very much. I'm doing this redistricting thing. I got to tell you, maybe one of the funniest articles I've seen. LifeSet again says that U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett is freaking out because she saw the lines and says, I do not currently reside in my district based upon the plan that has been drawn. Cracks me up, man, when you surprise me with the panicking call.
You could have just replaced the quote with that sound. Pretty much what it was.
Said the map, if approved, would redraw 5 Democrat-held seats and create potentially 3 new Republican-leaning districts, while also shifting 2 additional districts into Republican-favored territory. I mean, I understand the Democrats are mad. Story here also on Axios. Phil, did you go to Axios? I did. I go these places so you don't have to. Over 50 Texas Democrats fled the state Sunday in an attempt to prevent Republicans from holding a vote in the state house. Here's my question. Are you just never going to go home? Because I'm pretty sure they can convene the legislature at the call of the governor. He can call you into special session. Are you going to keep running away? Is that the way this works? We can't ever go home. We can't see our wives and children anymore, our families, our jobs, all the things. It's ridiculous. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton threatened to go hunt down Democrats, said they ought to be arrested. Well, guess what? Greg Abbott said he will take action to, quote, remove missing Democrats from membership in the Texas House if they're not back by Monday afternoon. The truancy ends now, he said. Apparently, there is a clause within the Texas state law that does allow for those who abandon their posts, or abdicating the duties of their office to be removed from office. And you know what? Maybe they went to Illinois. You and I were talking about why they go to Illinois. It may have something to do with extradition authority. So Abbott says he will use extradition authority to demand the return to Texas of any potential out-of-state felons, because apparently it's a felony to abandon your office under Texas state law. Interesting. So they went to a state where they knew there ain't no way in the world they'd ever get extradited. That's what they did. They went to a safe haven. They found a sanctuary state for abandoning your post, lawmakers. Now, Texas Governor Greg Abbott just texted in about the last 30 minutes, or tweeted, I'm sorry, and he posted, he said, Texas governor orders the arrest of Democrats who fled the state. That's the governor himself tweeting that. You also said you've got a sound clip from the Texas state legislature. They convened for the purpose of calling the roll, determining there was no quorum, immediately said they had to adjourn, but not until something else happened. You want to play it? All right, go ahead and play it.
Motion prevails. The sergeant at arms and any officers appointed by her are directed to send for all absentees whose attendance is not excused for the purposes of securing and maintaining their attendance under warrant of arrest if necessary until further order of the House.
Under warrant of arrest if necessary. Well, so they ain't playing. First of all, Democrats, let me just give you some advice. You cannot claim to be bold if you're running away. It doesn't work like that. You're not allowed to stake your claim on that being a sign of your courage and bravery. That's a misnomer. That is absolutely asinine. That is jackassery of the highest order. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and ask for the jackassery sound effect now, too, if you don't mind. Just hit me some jackassery. Thank you. You are well off into jackassery land. You are screaming as panicans and acting as jackasseries at every given turn. We're watching cacistocracy. I'm using all the words. I'm using all the famous right side words. Cacistocracy, the governance of a governing body by the least competent of its citizens. All right. So the bottom line is this: Democrats are scared, so they ran, and it's shameful. Absolutely shameful.
I do have to ask though: Are you worried? Are you worried that this may set a precedent that, if Texas is saying, well, you're I guess technically supposed to do it after every census, but really you really can just do it however you want. Is that just the Texas Constitution that says that, or is that going to set a precedent where like California is like, okay, we'll just redraw districts anytime we want, and it's just going to start a domino effect? I guess is Texas doing it to gain more Republican seats or whatever? Is that worth what it's going to do long term? could do more damage than anything.
Right now, Texas doesn't care.
Yeah, well, I think that's
Texas has weighed the odds and said we're in. So, first of all, I'll tell you, it will depend upon every state's constitution.
Mhm.
I don't know because I've never read the provision with that thought in mind, but I don't know that Alabama's would allow that. I think it's going to be every state's constitution is going to determine whether they can or not. And you can't just change a constitution. You can't go into the state house and quickly pass a bill that changes the constitution. It requires a referendum of the people. So a constitutional change in Alabama would require first a vote of the legislature, then a signature of the governor, followed by a vote of the people at the ballot box to say whether you do or don't want that enacted in our constitution. So even if Alabama wanted to change it to be able to do that, assuming we don't already have it, it wouldn't be a simple, quick process.
So, and I also see that and I think is Texas that worried that they may lose red seat? Like, I'm like, why would they, like, if they're comfortable, I don't know. I guess I'm just worried that them doing this is going to cause more damage long term than anything.
Oh, I'm not denying that. I'm not denying it. This is a mid-cycle a review or a redistricting or reapportionment of the lines. It's not normal. This is not what usually happens. So I get that part. But then again, here's the other piece. Elections have consequences. If your state is a majority Republican, that means the state wanted majority Republicans in those offices to make those decisions. If the state law, the Constitution, is already either specific or at least vague enough to be interpreted in a certain way, and they're acting on it, I feel certain they could have done what we did in Alabama multiple times and get what's called an opinion of the justices. That's where, before something is enacted, we get an opinion of the justices. Will this stand up? Apparently, somewhere along the line, they got all the comfort factor they needed and then went, why not?
Yeah.
And elections have consequences. The Constitution allows it. They took months to draw the lines. They're bringing it to a vote of the duly elected members of the body. And the Democrats don't like the fact that they're outnumbered. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah. And I mean, Democrats, you can't just leave. That's
what do you, so lame.
Like, what do you think your constituents are going to be happy that they voted for you just to leave, literally just to run away? And I think it's funny that Democrats act like, okay, if you want to say this is some political gamesmanship or whatever, okay, but like the Democrats are the kings of that, like the kings of political gamesmanship. You look at the reconciliation bill that was literally started by Nancy Pelosi to get the Affordable Care Act across the line. So it's like that, this is what they do. Okay. So you can be upset about it, but it's like, okay, well, you do the same thing. So you can't just run away.
It's something that's going to wind up playing out. But you know, the thing I go back to on this too is they ran away. Is that the new precedent? You're talking about setting precedent a minute ago. Is this the new precedent too? When you don't like it, you just run away.
I love them taking videos in front of a plane too. Like the Democrats from Texas, like you're not hiding the fact. You're literally just, I'm about to hop on this plane and I'll tell you why. It's like, I don't care why. What are you doing?
Social media is ripping them a new one right now too.
Yeah.
And they deserve it. You know, here's the bottom line. In fact, I tell you what, I just realized Fox has a top headline called Texas Dems ripped for their cartoonishly dumb strategy to flee to blue state, notorious for gerrymandering. And it talks about the fact that social media is ripping them a new one. You know, they can't be called heroes when they run away. That's not how this works. The world doesn't turn that way. There are no movies made about people who were heroes because they hid. That's not how this works. You're not going to find anyone who's going to look at this in the long term and go, that was so bold that they did that. I'm inspired by it. I want to be like them. I want them to write a book, and movies, statues should be made, all of it. No. Sooner or later, they got to go home. So all they're doing now is delaying the inevitable. This is sort of like having the bill read at length. It means nothing in the end. And
I think I said this to you off the air. I think I think they knew full well they were going to be arrested. I think they're just trying to be martyrs.
That's the other thing. Are they going to be arrested? I don't know yet. It's going to be interesting. Or are they going to be removed from office?
Like they want. It's almost like I think they want to get arrested to be like, look, they're arresting their political opponents. You can't do that. This is what they're trying to do.
And I don't know what the standard is. If the removal from office that's allowed for abandonment, what constitutes abandonment? Then you have to get into the definition of what is abandonment. And is there any precedent in this? It's kind of like when we had the impeachment proceedings brewing for Governor Robert Bentley. Turns out nobody had ever done it before. It was in the law, but there was no procedure for how it's done. So guess who got to be the one who drew it? That was me. I got assigned the task of helping draw the ability to impeach a government official because we had no procedure. I guarantee you there's not been a whole lot of history in Texas on how to arrest somebody who so-called abandons their post.
Yeah, there probably isn't.
Let me get a few text messages before I go to the break. John from Brownsboro, I'm glad Texas is firing back at the Dems. The last 2 times that I know of, they fled to Oklahoma and spent several weeks in a hotel to avoid a vote. It was a bad precedent to set. If they blatantly abdicate their post, then yeah, throw them all out. I'm with you. Thomas from Athens says, apologies to the Kingston Trio and their song, quote, but will they ever return? No, they'll never return. They are fini, are still unlearned. Dems will hide together in Chicago basements. These lawmakers will never return. Paul from Athens says, I did not know that. Paul from Athens says, too bad there's no law about obstructing a quorum and fleeing the state you serve. No doubt. I got a quick call I'll take. Do I have time? It's going to be quick. I got about a minute. Rusty from Harvest. Hey, Rusty, how you doing?
Hi, this is a repeat performance by the Dems.
Oh, yeah, it is.
They did this once before in Texas. And the governor sent out the, the state troopers and rangers to go find them all and drag them back into the legislature.
So that's what we need. We need Walker, Texas Ranger to go find them now.
That's right. But, they know better now, so they've run away to another state.
Yep.
What cowards?
What cowards? Rusty, I got to run to a break. Thanks for the call, man.
All right.
Take care. Yeah, it's amazing. Let's go ahead and take the break right now. We'll take it. We'll come right back. Y'all, this is not the way life is supposed to be. We don't like it. Run away. Run away. Bill Williams, Rightside Radio. We'll be right back. And I guess code word Irene was what launched the mission, right?
It was.
Which my secretary downstairs at the law firm, her name is Irene. I
Oh,
told her
really?
one day, I said, I don't know if you're aware of the use of your name in modern pop culture. And she went, I've never heard that. So anyway.
And actually, that's my character that says it in the movie.
That is your character. Yeah. And I want to talk about the movie and all that too at some point, just to get your thoughts on it. But Rangers have the mission of going in and securing some high-value targets, or securing the scene so that Delta can secure the high-value targets. You're part of the flight in. Who were you bringing in, by the way?
So I was the flight lead, which means I'm responsible for my whole flight of aircraft of the Ranger blocking force. So it's basically split into 2 pieces. We had the assault force, which is where the Delta guys are. They're primarily on little birds. Yeah. And they're going to go in first because they want the element of surprise. They want to be, busting doors down before, with limited amount of time to react, right? If you put the blocking force in first, then you bring the assault force in, the bad guys have a little bit more time to react. So they're going in first. We're right behind them. So as soon as their birds pull out, we're moving in, and I had 4 Blackhawks that made up the blocking force, plus 2 spare attack little birds, plus the search and rescue bird. So we're all coming in together on the second wave, basically. And we just set up a box. I mean, all they want is put a Ranger platoon on each corner, and the purpose is twofold. One, keep more bad guys from getting in, and then obviously we call them leakers, keeping the people you're after from getting out. And that all went pretty smoothly, even though we'd done it 6 times before. This was the 7th mission.
Right.
And, we had tremendous success. We had captured, I think, 27 people on a list of 50, taken no casualties of any significance. It didn't lose any birds. I mean, it was all going pretty well. There were 3-day missions and 3-night missions leading up to that. And this 7th mission is a day mission, which created some risk factors that we knew about, but, not my call.
Part of the job.
But, yeah, the commander makes the call.
Right.
They're within tolerance, I guess you could say, and when we go. And then all hell broke loose.
Yeah, it got crazy on the ground pretty quick, didn't it?
It did.
I know we had, 1 Ranger injured on the fast rope in, and that created a scene. And then I guess the all call went out, and it seemed like everybody in Mogadishu had an AK-47, and they all ran to the scene.
And that was their strategy, which we found out later. They actually had set up a system where once they knew where we were hitting the target, and again, they learned this over time, right? I always, when I talk about this, I try to compare it to sports, right? If you keep running the same play, the defense is going to adapt to that play, right? They understand, okay, this formation means this is what they're going to do, so here's how we counter that. It works the same way in the military. And so having done it 6 times, they obviously understood, okay, the helicopters will go to a target. That's where, they're going to put people on the ground. They're going to try to apprehend folks. If we can pin them in there, then, we might have some chance of
Plus, they were blocking roads, so the
Right.
ground convoy was
Absolutely.
having trouble.
Yep. So we found out after that was their strategy. Once they knew where the target was, they were all going to close on it, and it worked pretty well, actually.
Well, the Blackhawks stayed on station. In fact, one thing I've never known is what was the purpose of y'all? If there's going to be a ground convoy for the exfil, what was the purpose of y'all remaining on station like you did?
So we kept 2 attack Little Birds and 2 Blackhawks over the target for fire support. So
Okay.
the Little Birds, they've got miniguns and rockets,
Right.
and they're going to be slightly further out in terms of their restricted fire areas. Where the Blackhawks were being used, and honestly, hindsight being 2020, it wasn't a great way to do this, and it's not being done anymore, at least not in urban environments. They were being used for both the miniguns, which I don't think they used the miniguns a lot, but they had snipers on board. So it's a great stable platform for the shooter, but it's a 50-something foot long target for people on the ground that have weapons. Mm-hmm. And you can't fly fast, because if you're flying fast, your shooter can't hit anything. So the speed is less than what you would fly if you were, just trying to avoid fire. We're probably flying 50 knots, right? Which may seem fast to someone on the ground, but that's really slow for an aircraft. Mm-hmm. And it makes the aircraft much more vulnerable to ground fire.
And how far above ground were you?
Very low. I mean,
Okay.
the Blackhawks had to stay 150 feet and below.
Okay.
And the Little Birds, I think, were 300 feet and above, which worked out great. I mean, we'd done it, at that point, probably 50 times counting rehearsals, and never had any close.
And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. Just making common sense like a superpower. Chris from Gadsden checked in. He said, I think the courts drew the lines for the greater African-American representation while Hispanics are the largest minority. That's interesting. Rap from Athens says, why did they stop growing the house based on population? I don't know what you mean, because they still... Oh, growing the house. I guess, well, anyway, the bottom line is they still divide up by a certain percentage, and there's a calculated formula for that. Dave from Capshaw says, let ICE bring back the Texas legislators for violating state lines. That's funny. Grades are in. John from Huntsville says, JP and Todd Stacy both get an A+ for their equally outstanding performances, which means today's winner with an A+ is obviously the magnificent Phil Williams. Thank you, sir, for his absolutely brilliant performance. Congratulations, and I hope you have some spectacular meatloaf for dinner tonight. John from Huntsville. Appreciate you, John. Let me go to the phones right now, because our brethren on the road, Jeff Rowe from Indiana, is on the line. Hey, buddy, how are you?
I'm stuck in Nashville, trying to get through this mess.
Well, so you hit the major slowdown, huh?
Yeah. It's a wonder I didn't slow down for a wreck or something. Right before I got here, I got passed by this truck has radar in it. I can tell I passed the person in front of me. He's going. I had a guy pass me in a 65-mile-an-hour zone at 127 mile an hour.
Wow. In a car or a motorcycle?
In a car, a Beamer. Yeah.
Wow.
And then you wonder why they call this Crashville. Because usually I see those guys up the road a little ways that just wiped out somebody.
Wow.
You never know.
I have no way of knowing whether or not my 68 Mustang could ever go that fast back in the day. Anyway, that's another story.
Maybe.
Well, what do you think about all this stuff with the Texas Democrats fleeing the state, man?
I think, like I say, they ought to be, if they can, just arrest them and bring them back. And then, if there's possible, I would strip them of their office. I mean, that's what needs to be done. Just let them stay in Illinois. They deserted their state and everything. Well, let's let them become Illinois.
Well, I think we're about to see whether they fooled around and found out because yeah, that's exactly one of the options that the governor is considering. And the Texas House Republicans just issued the statement that the sergeant at arms should have word sent that they will be arrested. So I don't know. I mean, that's why they're hiding their state, because they're outside the jurisdiction. They don't want to be brought in, if you know what I'm saying. It's a goat rodeo.
As far as jurisdiction goes, why can't somebody from the state of Alabama sue the federal government for discrimination? Because if they drew your redistricted your lines based upon race, I thought we was through with that already.
Yeah.
You know?
We thought we were too. Well, we did. We fought it as a state, and then eventually decided it became kind of a moot point. It was getting past elections, so we had to go ahead and move forward because members of Congress were running for office and weren't sure whether they were going to run for a seat that they weren't going to have a year later. So the state acquiesced and decided to go ahead and accept it for now. But I guarantee you, we're going to try and get all the rules in place before the next time it's drawn.
What's funny is that if this would be the late 1800s, early 1900s, the Democrats would be up in arms because the blacks would all be Republican, as they used to be. They would be having a fit.
That's a fair point. Yeah, I mean, sooner or later, they're going to remember one day. I think that's why you're starting to see the word's kind of getting out. Democrats don't do what they say they'll do. And, oh, by the way, Democrats were the ones who fought civil rights, and they were the ones who fought the idea of emancipation. It's crazy.
Yeah. Back, like I say, after the Civil War, you couldn't find a black that was a Democrat unless they was just forced to be.
Wow.
So,
Interesting
how times have changed.
How indeed they have. Well, I'm interested to see what happens with these Democrats hiding out in Illinois right now. Governor Pritzker, by the way, J.B. Pritzker, the super partisan liberal Democrat governor of Illinois, just issued a statement, and all he said was, Governor Greg Abbott of Texas is a coward. That's what he said. I mean, it's just unreal.
Gee, that's like the pot calling the kettle black.
No doubt. While he harbors all the runaways, he's calling the other guy a coward. That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I am up against the break, so brother, you be safe on the road. We'll catch you tomorrow. All right.
All right, Phil. You all have a good one.
You too, buddy. Well, I am right up at it, and I got about 30 seconds. Let me grab one quick text message because it was John from Lexington, South Carolina. It says, why does the Supreme Court allow Illinois, California, and New York congressional gerrymandering, but the Alabama districts were disapproved? Because we were under what's known as a Voting Rights Act condition. We literally were held to an old standard dating back to the days of the Civil Rights Movement, and they weren't, because they were good. Remember, they were good. All right, that's it, you guys. That's amazing. What a day. I didn't even get through all my dippers, but hey, listen, the bottom line is there's more of us than there are of them. Oh, by the way, God is still on his throne. And yes, y'all stay in the fight. We'll see you tomorrow.